Okay, 1 second. Yeah, all good.
Are we all good?
Yeah,
Yes,
good to go.
Good to go. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Thank you for tuning in, joining in, etc. Will you please be gentle with me? This is my first time of doing it when we aren't all sat round a table. Emergency evacuation procedure, I presume, doesn't apply. Apologies for absence. Have we got any?
There are no apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of January 2020, and we'll do that one separately from the other one. Anybody got any questions on it before I propose it? No, I will propose those minutes then as written. Have I a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Those in favour?
Shall I go down the list? We haven't got Councillor Bailey. Councillor Braxton?
In favour, 4.
Councillor Clark?
In favour?
Councillor Cousins?
Yeah.
Councillor Garbutt-Moore?
In favour.
Councillor Keele?
4.
Councillor Middleton? Councillor Middleton?
4.
Councillor Oxley?
4.
Councillor Rain?
4.
Councillor Raper?
4.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. The next one is the minutes for Thursday the 23rd of January. Anybody any comments before I move them? Right, I'll propose that we adopt those minutes as written. Have I a seconder, please?
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Braxton?
Abstain.
Councillor Clark?
4.
Councillor Cousins?
4.
Councillor Garbutt-Moore?
4.
Councillor Keele?
Abstain because I wasn't present at the meeting.
Councillor Middleton?
4.
Councillor Oxley?
Abstain, not present.
Councillor Rain?
I'm trying to find the minute. Really sorry. Which was it for?
The
23rd.
23rd of January, and my record says that you were absent.
23rd of January. So I abstain. Sorry about that.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Councillor Raper?
4.
That's 5, 4 and 4 abstentions, Chair.
Thank you. Urgent business. I have none, but does anybody else anything that they wish to ask me to put on the agenda urgently? I think silence sounds as though we haven't got any urgent business. Declarations of interest. I will go down the list and get a yes or no from each one of you. Carrie?
No, Chair.
I haven't any. David?
No.
Nathan?
No, thank you.
Tracy?
No.
Will?
No, John.
Angela?
No.
And John?
Nothing comes to mind.
Councillor Keele, Chair.
Did I miss you, Di? I'm sorry.
Nice to be remembered.
Sorry?
Just said it's nice to be remembered, John, but I haven't got any declarations of interest.
You have?
No, I haven't. You missed me out, that's all.
Right, I missed you out. I thought I must have done. Sorry about that. Thank you. Chair's announcements. I have only got one. and it's really an apology from me, because I've had 2 days' notice as to whether we held this as a live meeting, and as we were going to do. And personally, I would have preferred it, purely personally, to have been a live meeting, because you can discuss people and wave at them even from 2 meters better than you can like this. I gather there were some people who thought that we should have left it as a live meeting and not done it electronically. And I'd just like a very quick feel from you as to whether we should in future, when it's something's balanced like this, go one way or the other. And before you bat, I have a thought. We haven't yet done any meetings that are hybrid. So I think there is a case for those who want to go to a meeting and are prepared to do it. You could have them meeting live, and you could have the other quarter, maximum a third of the meeting, doing it on a electronic basis. I'll just leave you with that thought as if I'd had a day or so to think about it, I might have proposed that, and I think it's something we should consider in the future. Right, can I go round? Carrie, have you any thoughts?
My preference would be to obviously meet live, but I obviously do have the technology to be able to do otherwise, but my preference is face-to-face. Okay.
David?
I would be against a live meeting. It is too risky at such a time as this.
Exactly, and I had you in mind and your thoughts on it when I went the way I did. How would you feel about a hybrid meeting where there was a live meeting but you were there on screen and brought in turn,
Well,
electronically and on a screen?
yes, I would go with that.
Okay. Nathan?
I personally, Chair, think we should be having meetings in person, but I do think people that might be shielding or have health conditions should have the choice to be able to come into the meeting electronically if they wish to do so.
So you would like the hybrid approach?
I would, please, yes.
I hope you're listening, Simon. Di?
To be honest, Chairman, I'm very happy with the hybrid approach. I think it covers all options, but I think several of us have suggested that in the past few months, but it wasn't taken up. But I think that's the best option, because obviously some people will feel safer that way.
So would you go live if there was a hybrid one, or would you go in electronically?
No, I'd probably stay online. I'm virtually doing all my life on virtual meetings at the moment, and I'm happy to do that.
So I didn't hear, which way would you go?
I'd probably go to a virtual meeting. I'd be happy to do that.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Tracy?
Yeah, I struggle with the connection thing, so I've had to come somewhere else to do it. So obviously I prefer it to be live, but I do understand that some people do have to shield, so I'm happy with the hybrid way.
So you would prefer live and happy with the hybrid. Will?
Yes, John. Live, I made my view on live meetings perfectly clear to Simon. I also suggested and asked whether or not there were people at Ryedale House tonight so that I could join them and we could have a hybrid meeting. So, but there's nobody there. Apparently, we're all virtual. I think it's crazy that we haven't been doing hybrid. So live out of choice, but hybrid, if not, I'm very happy with.
Thank you, Will. Angela?
I will go anyway, really. I mean, at the moment, I'm actually at Kirkham Henry. So I'm here just to be in the building with distancing, and it's worked well for me at the moment because I'd need someone to cover me. but I will go whichever.
So how would hybrid suit you? In other words, if there was a meeting...
If there was a meeting, I would get cover to be at the meeting.
But if you couldn't, for whatever, then you could do it hybrid.
Yeah.
Right, John?
I would prefer a live meeting, but I'm quite happy to go the hybrid. Both myself, speaking for myself rather, I have had a heart operation early year, just over a year ago. I'm in that category where I'm supposed to be vulnerable. I don't feel vulnerable, but age does come round and you can't avoid it. So I'd be quite happy to, if there's social distancing taking place with the full council, I would be quite happy with that. But if it's a hybrid, to get people who to feel comfortable, then I would go with that hybrid version.
I think we have a consensus there.
Chair, Councillor Oxley has his hand up to speak.
Yes, please, Will.
Thanks, Chris. John, just to be clear, I think where there is the possibility, if a meeting is being held live, and I think they all should be, I would much prefer everybody to try to get there. But if they can't, then I would accept the hybrid. Just to be clear what I'm saying. Thank you.
Yes, I think we're all saying that. And if you're in David Cousins' position and saying, I would prefer, but would be quite happy with a hybrid, and if John Raper decides that you maybe shouldn't, if it got a much higher level than it is now, maybe you shouldn't, etc., the live meeting with a hybrid content, I think would suit everybody from what they've said so far. Yeah. Shall I move that? Can you help me with the wording, Simon? But it needs to be something like that overview and scrutiny requests the chief executive to arrange future meetings of overview and scrutiny live, but with the facility for up to a third of the meeting being virtual.
I think just on that point, Chair, the only thing I'd add, and Barry as a solicitor may be able to advise us on this, obviously there may be occasions where it's not safe or lawful even to do a hybrid meeting. So I noted in the wording you said it's a request. So I take that on board. It's members' preference if it's safe and lawful to do so.
Yes, and I'm happy to add a safe and lawful into that wording, and I also would put in if possible.
Okay.
Because we haven't done a hybrid, and you might find out 4 days before the meeting where you all planned to do a hybrid that a hybrid couldn't or didn't or whatever. In which case, the possiblies and the if it's lawful. Obviously, if it's lawful, you do. If it's illegal, you can't do it. But if it's not practical or not possible or whatever, the same as far as I would be concerned would apply to the officers as well. But I've not gone down the officers here because their decision is personal to them. But another meeting, you would have a different group of officers, and they should have the choice of either coming live if they want to or virtual if they want to. And that covers Will's point of, I'd like all meetings to be live, but ties in with those, particularly David out of here and possibly John, that if their health and circumstances mean that they are better and safer off coming in virtually, then they should be able to do it. Shall I move that, or do you want to fiddle with the wording, Simon, or do you want to read it out again, or...?
Chris, I think we'll have a note of the wording. I just wanted to check whether Barry had any legal advice that he wanted to add in?
Yeah, thank you. Through your permission, Chair, just for people's benefit, my name's Barry Carn. I'm the Assistant Chief Exec for North Yorkshire County Council, and I'm also the Deputy Monitoring Officer for Ryedale. So I'm a solicitor by trade. Therefore, what I'm going to say is probably not welcome, but I feel duty bound to just kind of give my view with regards to this as well. And not taking anything away from what's been said, because I think that's a really healthy debate, and I think the way that you've worded it is actually a request. So you're not saying this is what's going to happen, it's actually the views of this committee which you would like to be taken into consideration appropriately when decision making is going to happen. So I've got no problem with what's being said, so why have I got my hand up? I suppose it's just to be able to kind of make the wider point with regards to, you know, we are living in, again, a really overused term, unprecedented times at the moment, whereby you as councillors, we as officers are making decisions on a very changing kind of background, where we're looking at background rates of infection. We're learning as we go along with regards to this virus and acting on the best information we possibly have. So I really welcome the approach of people making sure that they're seeking to protect shielded councillors, but also it's just right to say that it's important to look at the wider context as well, because if we are going to be having physical meetings with, you know, with appropriate COVID risk assessments, of course, there still is the opportunity for the virus to spread. So whilst people might not be shielding, they may take it into a household with people that are shielded. And with the numbers that we're learning from public health about how things are increasing over the last week, it's just, I would just give a word of warning that your requests being considered in the round will have to be considered from a health and safety perspective, and obviously the legal perspective as well. And, you know, we're not in a national lockdown or a local lockdown imposed by central government, so you can still meet. So the general rule is it's still lawful to meet. However, there are recommendations with regards to what public health is saying at the moment in certain areas of the county, where they're recommending that meetings over 30 people in a room aren't recommended. So all of that needs to be taken into account. As well as the view of councillors, there may be the view of officers. But again, from a legal point of view, a risk assessment needs to be taken at that time about whether it is safe for the organisation to have that meeting. So it was just simply a long-winded way to say I welcome your comments, but you know, it does need to go into a framework of decision making. So I think your views are really important, but it might not be the most decisive factor when weighing up those factors.
I thank you for your long-winded contribution. I actually don't think there's anything in the wording we put there that is contrary to what you are saying. And I think that covers it. But we have also got, if we're going to do this long-term, the advantage of meeting and seeing people physically is underestimated, I guess, in health terms. And I feel considerably safer in the council meeting that we had that had just over the 30 people there. I felt considerably safer there than I would do in most shops in Ryedale. Somebody's wanting to come back.
Councillor Oxley, Chair, wishes to speak.
Well,
thanks, John. I was going to say exactly what you said. I don't think there's anything that we've said that we can't work around with what Barry said. I think it's a positive way forward. I am disappointed that we couldn't fix that for tonight, because I think there was time. But I'm not going to make a big issue of it. Let's let's get some progress and move on. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Will. I did apologise at the beginning. I have had a total of about 2 hours to try to put that forward and into place, and I thought that was unreasonable to request that of the officers when I was only available for 2 hours in the last 48. But thank you, Will, for your support on that. And can we put the motion?
Chair,
have you got the wording, Chris? Do you want to read it out again?
Just before that, Chair, Councillor Garbutt-Moore would like to speak.
Yes, please. Yes, please, Nathan.
I was just going to ask us to move to the vote, but just to add that, you know, Ryedale does have one of the lowest infection rates in the whole of the Yorkshire region. We need to bear that in mind, and that's a positive, and it doesn't warrant complacency, but you know, it should be something that we keep in mind. So yeah, I was just going to say after that comment, let's move to the vote. Thank you.
I agree with that comment as well. But the increase from last week and forcing any individual to come to a live meeting without the discussion we've just had and the possibility of a hybrid, I wasn't prepared to force somebody who maybe should be shielding or who didn't feel safe to come to a live meeting. I personally would have preferred a live meeting and would have come, but I've done this because at this point it seemed the safest decision to make, particularly as I only had a couple of hours to try and change anything. But if we go for the hybrid one, you would be able to say, yes, I'm young and I'm prepared to take the risk because the risk is lower for me. Somebody who is shielding or in a household with somebody shielding is able to say, I'd like to go and do it electronically. So I hope we've got the best of all worlds out of that.
Chair, Councillor Oxley would like to speak.
Well,
John, it's not to do with this. I've just been made aware that Councillor Bailey is trying to get in but struggling. So I don't know whether anybody in IT can help him.
Right, when we finish this item, we'll have a short pause while IT has a quick struggle with Jim.
Thanks a lot, John.
Can we hear the wording, please, Chris?
Yes, Chair. I've got Overview and Scrutiny requests the Chief Executive to arrange future meetings of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to be live, but with the facility for up to a third of the meeting being virtual if it is safe and lawful to do so.
I'm happy with that wording. Have I got a seconder?
I'll second that.
John.
Who was that?
Carrie.
Carrie. Thank you. Right. Chris, would you like to run down the voting?
Councillor Braxton?
For.
Councillor Clark?
For.
Councillor Cousins?
For.
Councillor Garbutt-Moore?
For.
Councillor Keel?
For.
Councillor Middleton?
For.
Councillor Oxley?
For.
Councillor Rain?
For.
Councillor Raper?
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you, everybody. We've achieved Overview and Scrutiny's usual approach of trashing someone around until we get common ground. Can I ask you all a question and just wave furiously if you don't? Are you happy with the way this is working with me on a telephone and the way it's working so far? Anybody unhappy? Can you please raise your hand, and Christine, can you put them on?
Nobody. No raised hands, Chair, at present.
So I shall continue to struggle on. Right. Let's give Jim a few minutes to sort out. And the next item, while we're waiting for that, is the annual governance statement on page 13.
13.
13. I must learn to treat you with more respect, Barry.
Is this being recorded on YouTube? Can I have that as a permanent record?
Chair, Councillor Oxley would like to speak.
Can the technology department please delete that bit of the tape? Will?
Yeah, John, I believe Councillor Bailey's issue is that he's got an old iPad and he can't get on through it. So whether IT will be able to help him or not, I don't know.
Is anybody in contact, IT in contact with Jim Bailey or not? Because if you can't get in contact with him, nothing we can do.
Would it be sensible for him to join by phone like you
I was just going to suggest the same thing, Di. I'll suggest he joins by, I think, John.
Yes, that sounds right, Will. I'll go with that.
Okay, mate, thanks.
Anton?
Yeah.
I think you can kick off with the background to the annual governance statement, because Jim has seen more annual governance statements than any of the rest of us, I guess.
Okay.
And then when we get to the debates, if he hasn't come in by phone at that point, I'll go back to him as we're going through the others.
Okay, thank you.
Lovely. The floor is yours, sir.
Okay, thank you. So this is the draft annual governance statement. There's a very simple cover report, and the actual statement itself was drawn up some time ago. Normally, the committee would have seen this around about sort of May, June time, and we would seek your comments on it and any suggestions, particularly around the key issues at the end of the report. Those things we would like to highlight as key issues. We would seek committees' views, and those views would feed into our work to finalise the statement, and then the statement would then appear as a final version when the accounts are signed off. And that's what normally happens around sort of between May and July time. But obviously, as you'll be aware, the accounts process was extended. We did submit our accounts to the external auditors at the beginning of July. Our deadline for that was actually the end of August, but we got it in by the beginning of July. And those accounts included this draft annual governance statement. So the issue tonight really is for you to have a look at this, to feed your comments back to me. The thing I will say is that although we are halfway through the year already, there's nothing we can do about that, but it's still probably even more worth looking at this, because the governance statement, when it's published and agreed, should reflect the position at the time of signature. So we will update this. So some of it's already out of date. Very simply, for example, it says that council haven't approved the council plan. So some things have changed. We will be updating it. But really, it's just a chance for you to give your views as a committee and as members, and we'll take those into account and bring it back to you again in 3 weeks' time for final sign-off, before it then goes on to Policy and Resources in November. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Anton. Right. Carrie, have you any thoughts or comments on it?
No, John, I'm fine, thank you.
David?
No, I don't think I've got anything different to put.
Nathan?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Yes, I've become Simon. That's probably an advantage. Di?
No, I'm happy to note it as required in the report, Chair.
Tracy?
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Will?
Happy to note it, John, just with the observation that Anton's already touched on the issue about the council plan, and I think aligned to that performance management and performance review, but I've no doubt that will all be picked up and move forward with everything else as time goes by. But to me, they are the two key issues.
Do you want to come back on that at all, Anton?
No, just I'm nodding.
Nodding is just a little tricky to see over the phone, but I'll accept your nodding as an agreement. Yeah,
yes,
Angela.
I think I could hear you nodding, Anton.
I'm not sure if it's me the way I've read it, but page 13, it just says.
Hang on, page 13 will take me a week to find page. No, I've got a page 13 on this.
Government status. It just says statement. Sorry, it just says to produce this plan, and this was approved at the Policy and Resources in March 2021.
Sorry, Angela, can you go slowly with me? I'm looking for where you are.
So in the actual, have I read it wrong?
No, I'm trying to find where you are. Because you've got a chair that can't read at the moment, so it doesn't help. Where are we? I have got
in the actual draft annual governance statement.
Yeah.
Page 13.
I haven't. Mine aren't said numbered. My draft annual governance statement is in the 20s, I think.
Right.
It's page 29 of the actual committee paper, if that's any help.
Page 29 of the whole thing that we've had printed.
Right. Thank you, whoever that was.
John, sorry, it's Anton here. I think I can come in and here and just say, yes, it should say March 2020. I can't yet predict the future, so I'm afraid that's just a typo.
That's all I want to mention.
Yeah, thank you.
What's happened to the forward plan?
I can only apologise on behalf of the county council for some of our staff.
Sorry, that Anton, I didn't find that at all funny. I was not laughing. If you could hear me laughing, I wasn't. I was shaking my head. Right. John? John Raper?
Sorry, John, you're on mute at the moment.
You mute, Councillor Raper.
I bet you wish you could mute me.
It's come on now. Yeah, I have no problems with this. I'm willing to accept it as it's written. Thank you.
Right, have we gained Jim Bailey yet?
No.
Doesn't sound like it.
No, Chair.
No.
John, he has been advised to try and get in on his telephone from the email.
Yes, I realise that, but he might be. If he was in on the phone, I wouldn't know unless he said something. Right, Anton, I have two concerns in relation to this. The financial governance, etc., I have no concerns at all. But as the chair of Scrutiny, we, way over a year ago now, looked into equalities and diversity. And we did an interim report, and we compared it with the local government's checklist, local government association checklist. And we were a long way short. Anybody's definition, we were a long way short. I don't feel that Scrutiny over the next 6 months is going to be able to hold effective working parties frequently and quickly, and the cost and time would be massive. But it is something that in governance, equalities and diversity, that needs to be picked up. Would it be possible to put it into this?
Yes, thanks, John. We'll have a think about that in terms of wording, and I may come back to you separately before we do the final draft. But in any case, I'll share the final draft with you before we publish it for the next committee round in 3 weeks' time. But yes, I'm sure it's possible to include something in there.
Now, here's the surprise for you. I'm happy with that. Is everybody else happy with that? I don't think Scrutiny is going to be able to do it in the next 6 months, and it's an area of concern. And any organisation should be thinking diversity and should be thinking equality. And the fact that it is sat for over a year and we haven't got anywhere tells me it's something that just needs to be got underway. I don't think we're going to reach gold standard on that, Anton, in 6 months.
Okay.
But we must get it towards bronze, or whatever bronze says, or using whatever system we have. But we can't just leave it for long enough.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm happy. If anybody's unhappy with that, are you all happy for Anton to do that?
Yes.
No hands raised, Chris?
No hands raised, Chair.
No hands raised. Lovely. Now here's your little surprise for the evening, Anton.
I think I can guess what it is.
You've talked to somebody. Something like probably over 10 years ago, as a council, we drew up a biodiversity action plan. At a similar time, we did a climate change action plan and a third one. I think it was the equalities and diversity. And one sat on the shelf for 10 years and nothing happened, and one sat on the shelf for 9 years and nothing happened. I think this has sat on the shelf for in excess of 10 years. And anybody who, if you're looking at the governance of Ryedale Council in relation to the people of Ryedale, there are three strands. There are finance, there's social, and there's environment. We've got climate change moved up the scale massively. We've gone from having nothing to having an action plan that is happening. I might not think it's happening fast enough, but it is happening. But I don't think we have done anything on biodiversity for over 10 years. And on that basis, could I ask you, considering putting something onto the annual governance statement, because the world is looking at the loss of species, the world is looking at biodiversity, and as it stands at the moment, Ryedale doesn't appear to be. I'm asking you that, but I want to go round the room to see if anybody's got any problems with that approach. Have you any problems with that, Carrie?
No, not at all. I second that. Absolutely, it's something that we should be looking at.
David?
Yes, I agree.
Nathan?
I'm happy with that, thank you.
Di?
Yes, so am I. Quite happy with that, thank you.
Tracy?
Yeah, I think it's something we should be looking at.
Will?
John, yeah, I'm happy that we look at it. Have we got any? I haven't got the documents in front of me, and nobody may have. Have we not got reference to biodiversity in the climate change action plan?
There may be, but it won't be anywhere near the document we produced 10, 15 years ago.
I fully understand that, John. My only plea would be, if we have got it referenced, can we make sure that there is a link from that to whatever we do and vice versa?
Oh, yes. I would hope that the annual governance statement says, pulling that bit out, that we are going to go down that along the lines first mentioned in our climate change action plan of 11 years ago, and I rehashed one of a year ago.
Fine, John. You know me and processes, John. That makes me happy. Thank you.
I've made Will happy. Can you please make a note of that, please, Chris?
I certainly will.
Will Oxley is happy. Anybody else? Angela?
No, I'm very happy with that.
And John?
I can buy into that, no problem.
I thought you would. Right. I think, Anton, you've got a very clear steer there. I don't want to move anything because we haven't got wording that will fit it. But I think you've got a very powerful steer there that's coming without any canvassing, lobbying or anything else. That comes unanimously from us.
Okay. That's fine. I may come back to you, John.
You may do, but I will. I wouldn't have a clue where my copy was, and it will be certainly gathering dust because I have not seen it in X years at Ryedale.
Okay.
Anything further on the annual governance statement?
No raised hands, Chair.
Right, now, what do we do with the annual governance statement? Is there a recommendation here?
There is, Chair. It's to note the draft annual governance statement as presented and feedback any comments for consideration in the final statement to the Section 151 officer.
I'll move that, and we've put our comments to go back already.
I second that.
Thank you.
To vote.
Those in favour, you're on centre stage, Chris.
Councillor Braxton.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Cousins.
For.
Councillor Garbutt-Moore.
For.
Councillor Keel.
For.
Councillor Middleton.
For.
Councillor Oxley.
For.
Councillor Rain.
For.
Councillor Raper.
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Anton, much as I appreciate your company and your enjoy of listening to Overview and Scrutiny, if you wish to depart at this point, I don't think there's anything else on the agenda that is yours, is there?
No, there's not, John. But I'll stay silently in the background and just watch.
And nod.
So-
and nod.
and nod.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
right, Anton.
The nodding is absolutely vital.
I'll turn my camera off.
Oh. Right, we're now on to standards training, page 31, but it's probably not 31 for anybody else.
It is
Simon.
page 31 for me, Chair.
And it's 31 for me. The floor is yours, Simon.
Just before I introduce it, I was just going to say I think Councillor Bailey has now joined the meeting, just so you're aware.
Thank you. Good evening, Jim.
Good evening, Chairman. Sorry to be so slow. I've got you on my phone, so you're all a bit small. I'll go on.
I'm on the phone and I'm disappearingly small because there's no picture whatsoever, which is fortunate for everybody else.
But I know what you look like, Chair.
Thank you for putting the effort in to get here. Right, we're on to page 31. The standards training, and Simon Cockburn is just about to start. Simon, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. By way of introduction to both this and the next item, Overview and Scrutiny Committee acts as the Council Standards Committee, so it has a role in promoting and maintaining good standards of conduct. One of its specific roles is advising, training or arranging to train councillors on standards matters, and that's why I brought this first report. During the course of the year, there's been a number of complaints and issues raised, and out of conversations I've had as monitoring officer around those matters, and other conversations I've also had with a range of members from across different political groups, I think we've identified that it would be helpful for everybody to have some further in-depth training on standards matters. So I've been looking at what the content of that training might focus on, and there's a potential specification for 2 sessions of trainings attached to this report. One session would focus on standards and probity for elected members and matters around the code of conduct, and the next one would be around effective member and officer relations. We'd be proposing that these sessions would be mandatory, so we'd make provision that if members were not available to attend on the date and time of the session, that there'd be some sort of recorded version of the training available so it could be viewed afterwards, because I appreciate not everybody can always be available on exactly the same time and date. So this is brought here for discussion by the committee. We've also got Jill Baker attending tonight to provide comments on the standards reports. Members may be aware we have an independent person for standards who is someone separate to the council, who's not an elected member or a council officer, but who we use as a sounding board and advisor on standards matters, both matters of policy and training, and as well when we deal with specific complaints. So Jill's here and will no doubt be able to provide her comments to the committee as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Jill, that was a very good build-up. Would you like to add anything at this point? And please come back later if there's comments you want to make, obviously. And good evening.
Good evening, John. Good evening, Chair and committee members. Hopefully you can see me now. You couldn't when I logged on first. It's good to be here, and I'm equally sorry, though, that we're not here in person, because it is difficult to relate to you all when I don't know all of you. But I've been your independent person for some time, and I've got a long association with Ryedale District Council, and so I'm very happy to be able to provide what expertise I can. My background is in governance, and I've worked in the charitable and local government sector for many years. I'm now retired, and this is just a little thing I do on the side to contribute back to the community. What Simon has said in relation to the complaints that we've had over the past probably couple of years, nothing serious, but little bits of niggling that suggests that councillors don't always fully understand or aren't always completely aware of the implications of the code, perhaps especially in relation to, say, social media. So it's really good to see this training proposed. It seems to be comprehensive, and I'm pleased to see there's practical elements in there too. I do like that there's some follow-up and that nobody's going to be missed out, because I think being part of the training and discussing it in an informal environment with scenarios, etc., with each other, is very useful, and you will learn and understand, and it'll just help make sure we get things more right more of the time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jill. Barry, is there anything you'd like to add?
Chair, if you give me a platform, I'll use it. I mean, I haven't been involved in drafting this, but reviewing it, I think it's really good. I would say this as being a monitoring officer that's a bit too long in the tooth. Standards can't be owned by the monitoring officer or the independent person. It's really important that as you as councillors set the ethical standard for your own council. Councillors, in my experience, like to be judged by their peers. They like to have that input of someone who understands what it's like to be a councillor, but also that reflects their own council, and they set their own ethical bar. So I'm really supportive of this training. I think it's really good that you, as a committee sitting, doing your standards duties, state and support and amend and say what you want in this training, because you will be holding the councillors to this level of standard. So I think it is really important that you own this agenda and push it forward. So I think that's the only comment I wanted to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Barry. I two thoughts, and before I forget them, I'll pop them in. One is planning and licensing training is not just done on the course and the training session. If somebody can't attend it, you then have a meeting with somebody from planning or somebody from licensing. And I think just watching a video of a training session may be a little light, because you don't get whether or not that person has grasped it. So I wonder if, Simon, you could have a little think about that, because that can be fitted in with, if somebody can't make a training session, they need to come in and meet and discuss and look at the video, and rather than just say, yes, I've looked at the video, job done, good night. Can you have a think around that one for me?
Yes, I'm happy to take that on board and consider the follow-up.
And the other point that I would add is, particularly for new councillors, when they arrive, they have induction training. And if anybody remembers half of their induction in the first week, they are doing, or the first month, or whatever it is over that short period, they are doing incredibly well. And this plugs a hole that's concerned me for some time. And it probably ought to be done earlier in the cycle than this, so towards the end of the first year or whatever, rather than at the very beginning, but certainly no later than the end of the first year, so that it isn't done as like planning is. You can't do planning if you haven't done the course, but this is something that needs refreshing and going through. And from what I can see of this, it does all of that. So the timing is good, but the timing should have been a little earlier, but the rest of us in the world was somewhat busy in March and April, etc. Right, I'm going to go down, everybody. Jim, any thoughts and comments?
It's a good idea, Chair. It's a good idea. Regular updates on ethical codes, it's really important.
Carrie?
Yes, I agree with your statement that, this would have been kind of handier earlier on, as it were. So I really look forward to attending these sessions and hope that they will be productive. Yeah.
David?
Yes, I agree with everything that's been said. I think if you've been on the council a few years like I've been, you'll maybe get an award for being at all these here different ones. Yes, I think it's a good thing.
Nathan? As one of the newer councillors, am I roughly right at all the stuff that's thrown at you in induction?
It is a lot to take in. I agree with your comments at the start. I was just about to say that, Chair. Yeah, I think what you said was spot on, actually. So yeah, just to echo what you said, I agree. Yeah, thank you.
Di?
Yeah, I think this is somewhat overdue, and yeah, very pleased it's happening. Can I just check one thing? I can't find it now, but when I did read through, am I right in thinking that this training could also be made available to towns and parishes, Simon? Because I think it's every bit as relevant. In social media has been mentioned. It's every bit as relevant with regards to that for town and parish councillors as it is for district councillors. So if it hasn't been, if they haven't been included, it would be good to get that in there as well, I think.
I think in answer to that question, it's an arrangement with an external training provider. So if we were broadening the audience, there may be a cost to the other councils that wanted to come on board, but it's something we could explore.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful, Simon. I hope you agree, Chair.
Yes, very much so. And I think there's almost a case for if somebody hasn't done this training in district or parish, and they then go down the route of having broken one of the guidelines somewhere, that question needs to be very heavily asked. I don't know how you make it compulsory. I think you can have a good go, but I don't know whether you'll be able to make it compulsory for all the parish councillors and town councillors. But if they haven't had the video or haven't done whatever else you can arrange, then the monitoring officer could just raise a quiet eyebrow and say, and write to the chair of that parish council when that issue had been cleared up and point out that it doesn't appear that whoever it was that had not quite understood the rules hadn't done the training. And over a period of time, that will work its way out into the parishes and districts that they probably ought to do the training. But I think you might have difficulty in making them doing it.
Chair Barry would like to speak.
Yes, please, Barry.
Thank you, Chair. So I think it's really raised a really important point about parishes. I think parishes and parish council would welcome additional training. My only word of caution about this training is that you all have different codes of conduct at the moment. So at the moment, with regards to your code of conduct, it will be different, I suspect, from a number of parishes. Yours is very different from the county, for example. So it depends how you want to handle this. I would suggest just with regards to the history within Ryedale, that a specific training on your own code would be really helpful and welcome. I think some members have already said that it's overdue and they'd really welcome that. So I think providing that tailored-made training to your district is really important, and I'd concentrate on that. I think then we can kind of whatever learning from that can be given out to the parishes, but we need to give a specific message, because your code will be slightly different from the parishes. So what you don't want to do is add more complexity to a parish council that doesn't need it, or give them the alternative advice. The report then goes on to talk about the LGA's model code, and it may well be that all your districts and all your town and parish councils and you will adopt a model code, and I think at that stage it'll be really easy to provide universal training. And if you're having virtual training like this, then I can't see an additional cost for inviting more people onto the meeting. You can charge them for it and make it as a money spinning exercise, but knowing the district as I do, I don't think they'd want to do that. I think they want to do it from a moral duty about saying it's really good to have standards across the board. So again, another long-winded way of saying probably for this training session, I would probably recommend it's directed purely towards the district, and then when you have a model code, look at widening it up. But clearly you can give very positive messages about the training that's you provided and how you'd encourage that. From the county, we provide a regular update on standards and standards issues, which we're happy to circulate to districts and parish councils. So again, we can circulate that and make it available to all your parishes as well.
I wonder, Barry, is that the second time we've had that offer of circulating the updates? So have we not had them at Ryedale, or did we not request them? Because I think you've made that offer before.
I think so. As always within the county, I have lots of people who do all the work, and I try and take the credit for it. So I'm not too sure if it has gone out and been circulated, but I can make sure.
May I make it clear for the I'm not putting out any credit.
We can make sure that's circulated, Chair.
That would be useful. That would be useful. If you can pick that up, Simon, that would be equally useful.
Will do.
Right. I think we've covered everybody, have we?
No, Chair, we're up to Councillor Middleton.
We're up to Councillor Middleton. Will?
I've got 3 points, John. Number one is the point Barry's just made, that we can't cross district and parish at the minute because we have different rules. I think it's good for them. It would have to come after us, and I wouldn't want to see them mixed in with us. But Barry's already covered that. I'm not sure whether he's become the councillor or I'm becoming the solicitor, but it must be something like that's happening. Secondly is that in terms of the training, it does need to be done in small groups so that people can interact. Just watching videos and talking to people ain't the answer. So I think when we come to do it, it will have to be organised in ways that enable everybody to be part of an interactive session, even if that means doing 3 or 4 sessions rather than 1 or 2. I think that's really important as a former training person. That is the only way it really works, is to get that interaction. And the third point is, yes, it is overdue. We have had a few fractious issues around council in the last few years, and it's time that we actually got something in place, particularly given the change in personnel, so that we all understand how we are supposed to behave. But it's a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. I think you're underlining my point that just watching the video may not, which is a point I asked Simon to look into, that it does need to have at least the monitoring officer there to be going through with the people who couldn't attend the session, looking at the video and discussing it with them, rather than just hoping that it's sunk in.
Chair, I think it's sorry, John. I think it's even more. I think it's even more than that. I think there needs to be at least 3 or 4 people on each training session. If that means we have to juggle it around a bit, then that's what we have to do, because it's the interaction.
Yeah, I'm talking about the 1 or 2 that may have been missed, rather than the one.
The point I'm making, John, is if we're missing 1 or 2, we maybe have to ask 2 or 3 people to hang back and do it with them.
Yes. I'm perfectly happy with that. Are you happy with that, Simon?
Yes, that's something we can look into when we organise the training.
Lovely, thanks. Angela?
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea. And I also like the idea that it can be done at a different time if you cannot make that meeting, with a lot of my work not finishing until 9 o'clock at night. But the thing for me, yeah, I could go in during the day to meet anybody to go through a video, but I am very capable of being on my own with an officer going through that. I don't necessarily need 2 or 3 people with me to learn how, what to do here, there and everywhere. But I'm just very pleased that there will be an opportunity in case I can't make the actual time on an evening. Thank you.
I think you and Will will need to discuss that one further. I think I'm slightly nearer to Will, because you go into a meeting for training or whatever, and you actually gain from other people doing the training at the same time rather than just receiving the training yourself. John?
Fully agree with your last point there. I came onto this council in 1997, I think it was, and I'd been on another council previously. You can never stop learning. It always helps. And for people who just got elected, never been on a council before, it is absolutely crucial to take on board training programs that are provided by council to help them do a credible and worthwhile job and have an excellent experience doing so. It's crucial that everybody partakes. You can never have too many training programs, in my opinion, of any of the topics that we cover or have a responsibility over. It helps us understand what we're about and how to proceed. And some items that we get in front of us are and can be really scary. The responsibility that goes with it, of course, is shared by 30 people. But when you're sat at home alone with a paper in front of you, and you suddenly think, well, wow, that's a lot of money. Yeah, it can get really scary. So we have groups, and there's a possibility for learning within your own group, and then groups coming together and cross-talk. But the last point that you made about learning from each other, what Will said about learning from each other, is absolutely spot on. You can't fault it. So I'm with this all the way.
Thank you, John. Is there anything you want to? Is there anything you want to add? Sorry.
Sorry, Chair. Councillor Oxley would like to speak, and Councillor Rain, and we missed Councillor Middleton from.
I'll go to Tracy first. Sorry about that, Tracy.
Hi, yeah, I think it's not just new councillors that could benefit from some up-to-date training. I think it's all councillors, especially where behaviour's been concerned over the past year.
I agree with you completely. I'm just saying that taking in initially, this doesn't want to be in the first week of a new council. It needs to be a little way down the track, so that everybody, but including the people who've. And the hardest one, Will agree with me, the hardest ones to train are the ones who are doing it wrongly and have been doing it wrongly, whatever it is, for years. Because they know they're doing it right, when in fact they may not be. Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks, John.
I've got Will to come back.
Yeah, John, just pick up on what you just said. Absolutely right. It's not just the new faces. You've made the point for me, but I'll reiterate it. I do fundamentally agree with Angela's view. I'm much more, and I'm sure Simon will sort it out. If we have to have a pickup group that's 3 or 4 and we have to hold people back, let's do it. You'll learn from each other far more than you do by watching a video or talking to one person. It's just, but I'm sure it'll get sorted.
Yeah. Somebody else was wanting to come back.
Councillor Rain, Chair.
Hello.
Angela?
Don't want to be just awkward. I've been teaching for nearly 50 years and I'm learning every day. And I'm absolutely, this is wonderful to be able to have more training. But for us, a private lesson is actually very, very valuable. And so I'm just saying, for me, if I had to go in with an officer on my own because there was nobody else available, I would learn as much as anybody else just discussing anything to do with it. That's my point of view. Thank you.
And I think that's fine. And my initial point was it shouldn't just be a training video to watch. It needs to be with the officer, i.e. in this case, the monitoring officer. So I think we've got enough agreement there for everything to happen. Have you anything further to add, Simon, now you've heard people's comments?
We'll take on board people's comments and appreciate different people have different preferences for how they learn as well, and we want to make it effective for everybody. But my only other comment, Chair, is that I'm really pleased we've spent a bit of time talking about standards, because it's something we need to be doing more often, in my view, and hopefully we're on the way to having a more active standards committee role, which I think will be beneficial for everybody.
Yes, please. I couldn't agree more. Absolutely, absolutely spot on. Right. Let me see if I can read out the recommendation. To support the proposal outlined in the report by the provision of further mandatory training in standards for all councillors. I'll move it. Have I got a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that, John.
Thanks, Gary. Right, the floor is yours, Christine.
Okay, Councillor Bailey.
Yes, support that.
Councillor Braxton.
Yes, for.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Cousins.
For.
Councillor Garbutt-Moore.
For.
Councillor Keel.
For.
Councillor Middleton.
For.
Councillor Oxley.
For.
Councillor Rain.
For.
Councillor Raper.
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody. Next item is item 9 on my page 37. The floor is yours again, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. As we've just been talking about, we've got a code of conduct which sets out expected standards for councillors to follow, and there's a complaints process that sits under that for if people aren't satisfied with the standards being followed and there's alleged breaches to look at. The report we're going to talk about now fits in under the complaints process that we've currently got in place. There's been a committee for standards in public life that made a report a couple of years ago on ethical standards, and there are a number of recommendations for councils to consider, and this item comes out of one of those recommendations. The recommendation itself read that councils should publish a clear and straightforward public interest test against which allegations are filtered. So basically, when a complaint comes in to me as monitoring officer, there's an initial assessment that has to be undertaken, and that's something we do every time we get a complaint. But at Ryedale, we've not had that initial assessment process set out in writing and recorded. And what we're now being recommended is that we should be doing that. So attached to my report is an assessment process, which we're recommending is adopted, and also a template to go with it, which we would fill out every time we looked at a complaint. So at this stage in the process, we'd be looking at whether we take this forward, whether we take a complaint forward to look at in depth, whether it needs an investigation, whether it needs some sort of reconciliation or negotiated solution. So we're looking to filter out anything that doesn't come under the code of conduct, anything that we may have looked at before that's vexatious, that isn't evidenced. So this assessment process just makes it absolutely clear and transparent to the public or anybody who's submitting a complaint how we will deal with it and how we will reach a conclusion as to whether we take that matter further under our complaints process or we don't take it further. Jill Baker again is here to add comments in as independent person, and I'm sure Barry will add some comments in as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Jill, any comments?
Only to say that I'm very supportive of this. I think it will be really useful in ensuring that we've got consistency in approaching each complaint when it does come in. It'll help us to be more efficient as well, and hopefully that'll be a good thing. And as Simon's already said, transparency for the public. So I believe it's a really good thing. So very supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Barry?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I think Simon, when he was appointed as monitoring officer, was very keen to kind of implement best practice into the standards regime to ensure that there's proper documented evidence of how you're going to make decisions. And part of that best practice is having a set down local filter system. So I think Simon's been really keen to ensure that you have something whereby you as members set what that filter agenda is going to be for two really important reasons. One is so that the public can see when they're making complaints what their complaint's going to be judged by, because it can be really frustrating for a member of the public to make a complaint that actually, for legitimate reasons, isn't a complaint about a councillor's behaviour. They might not just be happy with a decision that's been made by the council or a policy decision. It's not really a complaint about councillors' behaviour. Having a set filter system which explains that is really important. And two, for you as councillors, I think it's really important that you set the agenda for your monitoring officer and your independent person to judge complaints and how they judge complaints by. So what you've got in the first appendix is the proposed judgments that you're empowering the monitoring officer and the independent person to assess complaints and to see whether they should be taken forward or whether they should be dismissed. So clearly political tit-for-tat complaints shouldn't be using council resources to be investigated, and they can be killed off at a local filter stage. However, if it is something about behaviour or corruption or bullying, then that should be taken forward. So I support Simon and the Independent's proposal that you have in the paper of having a set down filter, which means that your monitoring officer and your independent person will judge all complaints by, and that will filter it out to say actually the ones that legitimately need the resources to investigate and look at and get improvements can be done, and ones which may be vexatious can be filtered out, and also provide a process where you can have mediation. So I'm very supportive of your monitoring officer's proposal.
Thank you, Barry. Right, let's go through it. Jim?
Hang on a minute. I'm there, Chair. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I'm a little bit confused because we seem to have a process for handling complaints, stage 1, stage 2, those things. Already, maybe I'm thinking about the planning code of conduct or something, but what definitely is needed is an up-to-date and clear roadmap of how and where complaints fit into the process. And so if we haven't got that, we should do, and if this is it, I support it. What I'd also say is that I don't think we should be telling the independent person what to do about complaints. You know, it's their job really to sit back and make sure that we're doing it correctly. So I'm happy to go with this, but yeah, those are my comments.
Thank you, Jim. I didn't think we were telling the independent person here, so maybe I've missed something. Simon, would you like to come back on that?
Yes, just in terms of the questions about the complaints process, in terms of complaints about member conduct, this is just one stage in the process. So we have an agreed process already, which includes an initial assessment. This is just setting out clearly how the initial assessment stage works. There's also separately, and there's another item about this on the agenda later on, there's a council complaints process. So where it's a complaint about how the council has delivered a service or dealt with a matter, not a complaint about member conduct, there's a different process that's followed, and that does have a stage 1 and a stage 2 where complaints can be escalated if they're not resolved. So I think it's just important to note there's different complaints processes within the council for different matters.
Chair, can I come back?
Can I just add to that I think that needs underlining somewhere in the induction training and or elsewhere for people who are not aware that there are 2 complaints procedures as you've just outlined. Because it would be very easy to think that all complaints went down the same route, and they don't.
Chair, if I can just come back. I think that's my point, that for a member of the public who's just had something that they're upset about, but the last thing they want's clever plans and cunning tricks, and whether this is this system or that system, whether it goes through this process or that process. When people are upset and wanting something done about it, it needs to be really clear and really simple, and this isn't helping that process, I don't think.
That's why I'm agreeing with you, Jim, that there needs to be something somewhere that says if it is a complaint about the service and delivery of service by the council, it is this. If it is a complaint about a councillor, then it is that. And that is the bit that you're asking for, and I agree with you, ought to be in somewhere public, the website or whatever.
I think, Chair, if I can help on that, there has been a review of how the council handles complaints overall and customer service handling of complaints, and there's an item later on the agenda where we may be able to pick that up. Margaret Wallace is in on the meeting, who has responsibility for customer services, and I think we might be able to pick that up on this subsequent agenda item.
Yep. Can somebody remind me when we get to that? That would satisfy, I think, the same question as Jim asking. How do you feel about that, Jim?
Yeah, Chair, I mean, it's never simple, but the simpler the better, I think, when you're trying to deal with probity and good conduct.
And the complaints, the general complaints, could point that out, couldn't it, very simply? If it is a councillor, etc., it goes to the monitoring officer. Right. Let me go further down. Carrie.
No, I have nothing to comment on this. I think it's fairly straightforward, and I think that it's good that it's been brought up, but I think, I've got nothing to comment.
Right. David?
No, I think I've got no more to add to what we've mentioned.
Thank you, David. Nathan?
Happy to support this, thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. Di?
Yes, I'm also happy to support it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Di. Tracy? I won't miss you out this time.
Yeah, happy to support you, Chair.
Will?
It does what it says on the tin, John, and the 2 things are separate. This is internal. It's something we need in place, and it serves its purpose, so I'm fine with it.
Angela?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Will.
Absolutely fine with it.
John?
Yeah, overall, it's an excellent read, because looking at the complaints we have had, they're not that seriously and not that many. So from the info that we've got on the papers tonight, and overall with what we're trying to do and the way we're trying to do it, it's the way we're trying to do things, I think, that is key here. And if we can tighten that up and spur it on and make it effective and credible, then all to the good.
So you're in favour of it as it is. Lovely.
Yeah, I am.
Simon, I've got 2 comments. On the bottom of page 41, there is a paragraph that says the code does not currently apply to members' conduct outside the performance of their functions as members. Now, that has caused confusion in the past. only if they have engaged in private conduct activity which has a link with the functions of the office of member might the conduct in question be covered by the code. And I've always struggled with that one, because if you become elected as a councillor and then you do something completely outrageous, and the press and the social media and everywhere else describes you as councillor blogs, it isn't directly bringing the council into disrepute or whatever, but it can get very near. Can you expand on that paragraph for us and tell me if there's a way for handling of that and where the guidelines are?
I think, generally speaking, the code of conduct only applies when someone's clearly acting in their role as a councillor. So that means if you're acting purely in a personal capacity or in a work capacity, then the code of conduct doesn't apply. Where there can be problems is there's sometimes grey areas as to whether someone's acting as a councillor or not. And in those cases, they do have to be, you know, judged on a case-by-case basis. So it's difficult to generalise, but the code of conduct is drafted to try and provide some like private or personal capacity where people aren't acting as a councillor, and sometimes where they are. I'm thinking Barry might want to come in and add some further details on that question.
Can I, before I forget what Simon's just said, there are the Nolan principles, and I'm not convinced that they apply only to you as a councillor when you're acting on behalf of the council or on behalf of yourself as a councillor. I've always had the belief that they were a little bit broader than that. Barry.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Can I, as a lawyer, can I say exactly the same as Simon, but with more words and more costly to you? So, with regards to what the actual...
Hang on a minute. That's twice you've mentioned costly this evening. Are you being paid for this?
To do this out of love. Members may remember, if they're my age or above, regards to what happened to Livingstone with regards to London. So he made a comment about a reporter, which was then reported as a breach of the code of conduct. And yes, he took the matter to court, and he was successfully able to argue that his comments weren't made in his official capacity, but was made in his private capacity. So he said something offensive. For monitoring officers like myself, it was said actually in a press meeting after a press meeting. For people like myself who would say, well, actually, that's a person acting in their official capacity in the public domain. The court looked at the legislation and said, actually, the legislation which puts the code of conduct into law only applies to councillors in their official capacity. So what the law recognises is that you as members are entitled to your private life. So if you go and have a neighbourhood dispute with your neighbour about a boundary dispute and get into an argument and say something inappropriate, well, that's not a code of conduct issue. If your neighbour reports you saying my neighbour was very rude to me, oh, by the way, he was a councillor, that's not acting in your official capacity. If clearly you're at a committee meeting and you use inappropriate language, or you're bullying, or you do something inappropriate, then clearly you're acting in your official capacity. So if the world was as simple as black and white, that would be the end of the conversation. What the world is very grey, hence you have so many lawyers. You have issues where, for example, on social media, you'll have councillors making comments, sometimes in their personal capacity, sometimes in their capacity as a councillor. And that's where it can get really complicated. So hence, I think the need for training. If you are saying things as a councillor, if you've got a councillor in your, forgive me, because again, I'm too old, your Twitter hashtag or whatever your social media account is, if it's clear that you've got a councillor there and you're saying comments as a councillor, well, the code will kick in. If, however, you're doing it in your private capacity and you're not as a councillor, then it wouldn't. That is a really grey area, and you can be, you can try to say things in a private capacity which people perceive to be as you as a councillor. So, I would agree with you, Chair, that, if you are a councillor, you should always behave in a way that you're judged by the public. but the law isn't quite as clear as that. It does allow you to have and do things in your private capacity, which not necessarily comply with the Nolan principles, for example. However, I do think it's a grey area, and I think that members of the public will hold you to account to a higher standard. So hopefully I've said exactly the same as Simon, but in a longer way.
My standards training a long way back, clearly not as far as yours, Barry, but a long way back, was that it had to be viewed by the person travelling on the bus as to what they thought. Now, if you've got a Twitter feed that's running down and you say something as an individual, and then somebody says it's all very well for Councillor whatever to say that, but he ought to this, and then that person comes back and says something that's offensive, I think this paragraph could do with beefing up. And I fully respect the point you're making legally, and Livingston got out, but I suspect an awful lot of people thought Livingston was, how shall I put it, using the legal niceties to get out of what he should or shouldn't have been doing. I'll probably get sued by him for that. But the council as a whole, particularly if you're a higher profile councillor, does reflect on the council what the councillor does, and there should be something in here that sort of implies that, because there is a line, it is grey, but I think councillors ought to be warned that they need to be particularly careful in their individual capacity, that this can't be construed as a councillor, because if it is, then this lot applies, but that needs stating somewhere, would be my thought. So no disagreement, but I think it needs to be made clear to councillors that that isn't a defence that would always work.
And I think through your monitoring officer you can look at that, but we just need to be careful that we don't say anything that doesn't reflect what the legal position is. What I do agree with you about is I think it would be really helpful for a future work of this committee after you've done your training is to actually do a protocol or some guidance on things like social media. I think that's a really rich area where this committee could get its teeth into and actually set your own standards about what you expect from your councillors and what you consider to be in their official capacity and what isn't. So I think a protocol or guidance on that, which this committee can own and then send out, would be some really interesting future work for a forward plan.
And that fits in with what I'm saying, that if you've said something as an individual and then on the feed somebody comes back and says it's all very well for Councillor Snodgrass to say that, etc., but he is this, and then Councillor Snodgrass comes back too offensively, really the advice probably ought to be that if you've been referred to a councillor, you need to put in there, this is not me acting as a councillor, this is me acting as an individual. That would be a good defence for that councillor. If that councillor accepts the title of councillor, then they are probably stepping the wrong side of this. But I'm quite happy for Simon and you to have a further look at that. And if you can't do anything, you can't. My second point is, it says at the bottom of this form, please note there is no right of appeal in relation to this assessment. And I, as a libertarian, am very, very nervous about anything at any level that hasn't got a right of appeal. And if we're going to make this, in your words, Barry, process of mediation and transparent, if that person hasn't got a right of appeal, and it is wrong, in their opinion, how do you sort it?
I think if I can come in terms of the answer to that, there's not a statutory right to appeal, which is why it's drafted as it is.
I understand
if
that.
we introduced a discretionary right to appeal, the issue would really be more of a practical one, that we'd very quickly run out of people because it's a monitoring officer, an independent person assessment. It's then around who does the appeal and who's available. It's something, again, that I can consider with Barry whether there are options, but it's more around the practicalities than anything else that we'd have to look.
That's what I thought you would say. And if there is no statutory right to an appeal, hopefully that doesn't mean that we can't have an appeal. And what we need now is a good lawyer to word it so that there is an appeal. And I can't see any problem with being able to raise it with another monitoring officer of another council, if that, so you would have a person that could be there. It's going to be the exception. I just don't like something that is absolute and final. And if we're wanting to make it mediation and transparent, if you can't have an appeal on it and you believe it's wrong, where do you go?
Chair, Councillor Raper would like to speak.
Can I come back to you in a second, John? Barry, have you any thoughts on that?
Through you, Chair. I don't know about a good lawyer. You've got me at the moment, so afterwards
I know, that's why I emphasised it.
So you're absolutely right, which pains me to say, that there is no statutory right of appeal, but that doesn't stop you putting an appeal process in. I'm very much in favour, and I would say this as a monitoring officer, with regards to your monitoring officer's view, is that you've got a process of doing a local filter of an assessment. So for example, your monitoring officer and your independent person. So it's important that it isn't just one individual, it's somebody who's independent from the council, says that that's a vexatious complaint, for example. Giving that person a right of appeal to another monitoring officer that might add some additional cost, or going straight to your chief exec, for example, is a process that for my council doesn't go ahead, doesn't think is appropriate in that stage, and we don't have that right of appeal. You have the individual has a right to judicially review the decision, a very expensive process, admittedly, or go to the ombudsman in a very limited circumstances. So whilst there is no right of appeal to the council, there are options for that person. But you are absolutely right. If you do want to have a right of appeal from that initial assessment, you can build that in. Could you put it in, and I did the monitoring officer of another council sort of off the top of my head, could you have it to the standard subcommittee or something of this nature? You can have it to the standard subcommittee. The problem that I have with that is you then go to the subcommittee, who then say, OK, it was a view not to have an investigation. Now we think you should have an investigation. You then have the investigation, and then it might go back to that subcommittee for a decision. So if you then say, well, you need to create a whole range of subcommittees so that they don't, take part in the same decision that they've adjudicated on earlier, it just gets a bit complicated. But that can be worked around, so that shouldn't be the ultimate barrier. There is a fundamental principle about whether you want a right of appeal or not. If you do, we'll need to make sure we get something that works. I would be happier with that, and I don't think it's going to be that frequent. I think it's going to be rare. But I think we should, I don't like not having an appeal, because if you have a vexatious view from a independent person, not the present one, or the monitoring officer, not the present one, or the deputy monitoring officer, not the present one, and you have that, the person should have a right of appeal somewhere. I'll leave it with the two of you from my angle. John, sorry about that. I just wanted to complete that process that we were on.
Thank you, John. I don't know if you can see that, but I've got it written down here.
I can't see anything. Even if I was on video, I couldn't see anything, so keep going.
And the recording will probably take it down. Can one be made, though? I've written down. Can an appeal be made? Because I made the same red light came on at the same time as it did with you, in the same way. It shouldn't be hitting the buffers at this particular point. And if in all fairness, we need a right of appeal at the very end. If somebody feels they are being disadvantaged or mistreated or maligned, and I think it's vital that little bit is added in. Thank you. And sorry, can I just check with the monitoring officer? At the moment, there isn't a right of appeal. So at the moment, you do have a local filter already. You don't have the criteria. So this is just approving the criteria. So I think what you're suggesting is an additional right of appeal that isn't there at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's right, isn't it, Simon?
Yes, that's right.
I mean, I like the transparency of this because in previous times we have not had this level at all. And apart from that right of appeal, I think this is absolutely brilliant. But I just would like that in there. And if anybody, are we happy for Simon and Barry to have a look at how you could build in an appeal? And I think it's going to be rare because we don't get that many complaints, full stop. But if you had one where somebody did want to appeal, can the two of you look into it? Now then, if the two of them have said they will look into it, rather than going down a whole voting system, if anybody's unhappy with that, can they please waive?
And sorry, Chair, are you suggesting that we look into it and bring another report back to this committee, or are you looking for us to look into it and delegate the powers to actually put something in?
Well, if you can put an appeal in, I'm happy to delegate it to you. But if you can't put an appeal in, do you think you can?
I think other members want to speak at that, so that's that's a proposal. Clearly, you can put an appeal into the chief exec. You can put an appeal into the standards committee or the subcommittee. There are a number of options you can put in. I was just testing the level of delegation you wanted to look into, or whether you wanted another report back to a future meeting. So I'll be quiet there because I think other members want to come in.
Right.
Chair,
who else is waving?
Chair, Jill would like to speak, and then Councillor Oxley, and then Councillor Raper.
Jill.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to put a thought into your head that I wouldn't be surprised if many of our complainants would always appeal. My experience of complainants, and I have dealt with complainants on the tenancy side when I worked at Yorkshire Housing, is very often people aren't happy until they've got to the highest level they can get to. So I'm just putting that in as a thought. You might find that if we have a level at which people can complain, they will go to that level.
I think you're right, and I think you're right. And I'm not suggesting that you have an appeal system that runs up to the Supreme Court or whichever our top court is. I am suggesting that you have at least one level of appealing so that they have a feeling that they're not just being dismissed by the council. That's my thought. I think you're going to have to bring this back, you two, because I think we're going to see what it is. Now I've got two other people here. Will?
Thank you, John. No, I can't see any value in having an appeal in this. With any system, you always have to draw a line, or where do you draw a line? The appeals just go on and on and on. If the people concerned, the professional people we are employing to do this, are doing a professional job, we stand on that decision. Barry's already said they can take appeals elsewhere outside of the system. I think that's what we should make them do. We're just running the.
I've no problem with that, but it doesn't say that.
So we don't need an appeal system, John. I'd be very much against it.
I'm suggesting that that you just delete there is no appeal to this and let them go whichever route they want. But when it says there is no right of appeal, that is a brick wall that some awkward people, if they were in that position, would feel abused by the system.
Well, if the system's been applied properly and everybody's done their job properly, it should have been, that should be an end to it. I'm very happy with it as it is, John, and I would not want to see it changed.
Okay. We're going to end up taking a vote on this, I guess. John?
I'm on something completely different, if you want to take the vote first.
You're on a completely different issue other than this appeal. Okay. We have
sorry, Chair, I feel that I would be doing a disservice about the appeal point, just to also point out, we're just talking about the local filter. If you make a decision then to have an investigation and take the matter to the standards committee and then make a decision, I should point out your system, like many others, doesn't have an appeal on that either. So whether that offends your libertarian views as well is just a point to take a note. So once the decision's made by the committee, at the moment that's final. It's a cheap shot, but I wanted to take it.
No, and I appreciate your shot and also its cheapness, but there we are. I do not like the absoluteness of that. And I personally, I'm going to propose that we ask you and we ask Simon, with your assistance in brackets, to look at the possibility of removing that sentence, there is no right of appeal in relation to this assessment. And I'm going to leave it like that because I could almost live with that sentence not being there. So that if people did want to appeal, they would go to the chief executive or whatever. I don't want them to be, how shall I put it, stopped by the statement, there is no right of appeal.
And I
suspect if they appeal to the chief executive, the chair of standards and the standards committee, they would get somewhere. And if you want to cut them down to fit in with Jill's point, just removing that sentence might be sufficient.
And just to be clear, sorry, Chair, because I realise that I'm dragging this meeting on, but if you had that sentence taken out, are you suggesting you'd encourage then people to speak to the chief exec or speak to the chair of standards? Because my worry from a transparency and standards point of view, they will be then working to something that isn't in your process or your procedure. So I wouldn't recommend having an informal process that your committee hasn't approved. If you're saying they wouldn't appeal and they wouldn't approach them, then that's fine. But if you're saying that allows a different process whereby they could speak to somebody else who could somehow overrule the decision, that's not following a process, and I wouldn't like that as a monitoring officer. But
so you would let me get this clear. You would prefer to put in there that they can appeal to the chief executive if that was your appeal process.
Yeah. So being very clear, I prefer how it's written at the moment because I understand that. I wouldn't like that as an officer. But then if you were removing it, I'm happy with that as well. But then I wouldn't allow or wouldn't suggest you allow then somehow an informal appeal to the chair of standards or to the chief exec, because that means that they're operating outside a policy or process, which I don't like. I think have a process, have the conviction of that process and write it down.
I think we need more information on this as to what the possibilities are.
Chair, Councillor Middleton would like to speak.
Tracy?
Yes, I'm with you on this one, John. I do think there needs to be an appeal process. I don't think it's good enough how it's written at the moment.
So can I just throw out a draft proposal, if you'd like to make a note, Christine?
Yeah.
That the committee, and this would be the amendment to the recommendation, and the amendment would we call upon the monitoring officer to look further into the statement at the end of the record of assessment of complaint, that the monitoring officer looks into either removing the statement, there is no right of appeal, or looking into a one level of appeal process. Is that clear enough for the lawyer and the monitoring officer before I ask people's thoughts on it?
So just as a deputy monitoring, I will bow down to the monitoring officer. Is there an alternative proposal, which is you agree this policy, yes, remove that there's no right of appeal, ask for a further report to then set out an appeal, a potential appeal process? Because at the moment you haven't got one, so you're not changing that. All you're doing is putting some clarity and having some criteria for an assessment.
Put the word draft in. We're accepting the proposal. Let me have a flip back to the. Sorry about this. I'm looking back to the recommendations. The use and publication of the assessment for standards complaints attached in appendix something and something of the report be approved, with the proviso that this last sentence is looked into. That's the shorthand for what I'm saying.
And I suppose I'm suggesting maybe remove that sentence, approve the policies and ask for a future report to come to the committee about a potential appeal process. And therefore, then you can consider an appeal process there, because that's adding a new element into it. So I'm suggesting, so sorry, it's obviously to you as a chair and you as the amendments, but I'm suggesting approving a policy now, because I think there's general support of having clear criteria and that should be implemented as quickly as possible. I think what you're now talking about is introducing an appeal process to the complaints process. And I'm suggesting that maybe you have that at the next standards committee as another paper to approve. But I realise I am overstepping the mark as an officer now, and I will be quiet.
I realise you are overstepping the mark, but as your wording is far better than anything I could have produced, I will ignore that overstepping on this one occasion. Can I have a show of hands if anybody wishes to bat against that round the room? Is everybody happy with?
No raised hands, Chair.
So I'm going to. Can you give us the wording for that, Barry, please?
I think is to approve the. It's not the exact wording, but to approve the.
Well, let me read the wording out. The use and publication of the assessment for standards complaints attached in the report be approved. With a further recommendation that an additional report on a potential appeal mechanism for the local filter be submitted to the next standards committee. And then I'd probably just, for the sake of clarity, also add just the removal of the words at the moment for there's no right of appeal. We just take that words out of the policy. So you've got a policy that can be enacted straight away. It doesn't have a right of appeal because you don't have an appeal process. The First Amendment, this is getting more like Trump every day. The First Amendment then is to delete the no appeal sentence at the end.
I think that's right, Chair.
Right. Anybody object to that? I'm going to take a vote on it, but if you want to object to it, can you bat on it?
Councillor Raper has his hand raised to speak, Chair.
John?
I'm still waiting to speak on the item I wanted to raise. It's akin, and if I can take it before we go to vote, just in case it affects in any way, shape or form. But on page 42, passage of time, where we are, and this report's come forward because of the passage of time issue that you and I are both well aware of. And I'm conscious that we do not want to be seen ever again as lacking for a complaint to come forward because of a passage of time. If an offence has taken place or a wrong has been done, we must investigate and do something about it as a matter of course, and it shouldn't be because of a matter of time that we say, oh, well, you're too late now, because that has been the experience for you and myself and an ex-member of staff. And I think we need to be very careful on that particular point, that passage of time is not a good idea to say, no, you can't appeal. And if that could be worded in somehow, I'll be very grateful.
Yes, so long ago is something that a couple of barristers could spend a whole afternoon debating, isn't it? It's so long ago in the previous council, or is it 15 years ago, or is it 6 months ago, that these would be little benefit. How can you help me, Simon? Thank you, John.
Yeah, on this one, I think clearly whether the passage of time is relevant or how relevant it is to whether we investigate a complaint depends on the nature of the complaint and the evidence for the complaint. If there were, very significant allegations of misconduct, then the fact that they were allegations that happened some time ago wouldn't necessarily mean they should be dismissed. If it was a very, minor matter that had happened a very long time ago and potentially was very hard to get evidence on and investigate, then that might be a reason for not taking the matter further. So I wouldn't want anybody to think we would dismiss significant allegations on the basis that they're just things that happened a long time ago, because as we all know from things that have been in the media over the past few years, there can be very significant and upsetting matters from some time ago that need to be investigated and addressed.
If the answer is yes, the period of time that has passed since the alleged conduct occurred, whether this matter should be referred for. Could there be a sentence at the end of there to say that the time period would the time period be influenced by the severity of the actions, or some word like that?
Yeah, so it's through you, Chair. Again, apologies. I'm probably just overstepping my turn again. So
I'm ignoring you overstepping it, so keep going.
Okay. So some councils have a sentence which says, matters that are more than 12 months wouldn't generally be investigated unless it's a matter of public interest. So they put like a caveat to the carve out saying, actually, if it's a public interest matter, well, then you don't worry about the delay or the 12 months, but there might be legitimate reasons why it hasn't been brought forward. People might have been scared at the time, or new evidence has emerged. So it's a get out which allows you to do that. So just looking at the wording at the moment, you kind of have it in, but it's probably more implied than expressed, where is the complaint about something that happened so long ago that there'd be little benefit in taking action now. I would argue as a lawyer, well, if there's something in the public interest, it would still have benefit. So I think you could add a sentence under that passage of time bit which just says, it is recognised that if it's in the public interest to investigate a matter, despite the passage of time, it will still be investigated.
How do you feel about that, John?
Yeah, that's okay for me. I wasn't the person that was maligned, but that particular person might have a different opinion.
But your reference to something that you and I both know, that would cover that, wouldn't it?
It just about would, yeah. It's a fig leaf on a big bum, but it will cover it a bit.
I'm happy with that wording. Can that wording be put in, Simon?
Yes, I've taken a note of it while we were speaking.
Chair, Councillor Oxley would like to speak.
Well,
yes, John, going back to your question before John started, if you're going to take that sentence out of the form, there's no right of appeal. I think it should be passed with that in and then reviewed. So if you're taking that sentence out, I'll be voting against. And on the passage of time, what we've already got there is entirely flexible enough and doesn't need changing, in my opinion.
Yes. I think we're going to end up voting on this, which is not like us. We usually end up with mulling it round till we get agreement. So we have two things. We have John's proposal, and if you'd like to word that again, Barry, because John's agreed with it and I'm comfortable with it, and the case that he and I are both alluding to, I think would be covered by that. I wouldn't use John's fig leaf analogy, but I might remember what he meant.
I've got a note of the wording, if that helps, Chair.
So
that'll definitely help me. I was about to refer to the YouTube video, so no, if Simon can present it, that'd be great.
It's adding a reference under the passage of time that it is recognised that if a matter is of public interest to be investigated, then this matter will still be investigated.
I'm happy with that. Can we move that? I will move that as an amendment then. Have I got a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Right, can we go down the voting bit, please?
We can, Chair. Councillor Bailey?
No, Chair, I don't support this.
Is that against, Councillor Bailey?
Yeah.
Councillor Braxton?
For.
Councillor Clark?
For.
Councillor Cousins?
For.
Councillor Garbutt-Moore?
For.
Councillor Keell?
For.
Councillor Middleton?
For.
Councillor Oxley.
Sorry, against.
Councillor Rain.
For.
Councillor Raper.
For.
That's 8 for, Chair, and 2 against.
Thank you, everybody. I have tried to get unanimity, but we can't always achieve it. I think the next amendment is to delete the "there is no right of appeal" in relation to this assessment. Just delete the sentence. We know where we're going to propose with it, but I move that we delete that sentence from the assessment form.
I'll second that.
I've got a seconder.
Can I just speak a second, Chair, please?
Yes, please, Jim.
Sure. My understanding is, although the council has its process for assessing its complaints, once the process from the council is exhausted, then a complainant has the option to go to the ombudsman or to further afield. And so, this is our internal process. And once that's been exhausted, then the ombudsman would take over. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair, the Ombudsman is a strange beast when it comes to complaints about councillors. So there is a right to complain. Whether they take it up or not is another matter. So they'll only look at process with regards to has it followed the right process. So whilst there is a complaint, I would say it's limited. There is the right to take it to court, though. So you can judicially review the decision. And that's like ultimately when any decision of the council is made, when it's gone to the highest point, you can always judicially review a decision on the basis that the council hasn't exercised due process. So there is a legal route, but it's, admittedly, it's an expensive route.
So, sorry, Chair, to come back to that. So yeah, the judicial review on this case would be that the decision not to accept or uphold the complaint was flawed.
That's correct, Chair. Absolutely.
Or the process was flawed.
So the grounds would be no reasonable monitoring officer could come up with the same decision, or that the monitoring officer and the independent person considered the wrong facts in coming out there. So that is the standard process.
Right. Okay. Anybody else want to bat on that before we put it to the vote?
No other hands are raised, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Right. So the amendment is to delete "there is no right of appeal" in relation to this assessment. I'm so move.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we vote. Councillor Bailey?
I'll just abstain on this one, I think, because I'm not quite sure where we're going.
Councillor Braxton?
For.
Councillor Clark?
For.
Councillor Cousins?
Abstain.
Councillor Garbutt-Moore?
For.
Councillor Keel?
For.
Councillor Middleton?
For.
Councillor Oxley?
Against.
Councillor Rain?
For.
Councillor Raper?
For.
That's 7 for, 1 against and 2 abstentions, Chair.
Thank you, everybody. We now come to the Barry Khan amendment, which you've got written down, Barry, and I haven't.
And please can we not refer it to as my amendment? I'm happy not to have an appeal process.
No, you won't. When you've read it out, I'm going to move it.
Yeah,
but if you overstep the mark, then I may overstep the mark in attributing it to you.
Yeah. So I think the recommendation would be that which follows the existing wording, which is the use and the publication of the filter assessment for standards complaint attached as appendix A and B of the report as amended be approved. So I'd take that as read. And then the additional amendment would be for a future report to be provided by the monitoring officer to the next standards committee, or you sitting as a standards committee, to give options with regards to an appeal process for the local filter system.
So we're voting on that amendment first. I propose it.
Can I just add in, Chair, given that it's only, I think, about 3 weeks to the next Overview and Scrutiny Committee, it might be that the next time you sit as a Standards Committee with that report isn't the very next meeting, to allow us time to consider and put something together.
Wow, my heroes have got clay feet. No, I would have been staggered if you thought you could have done it for the next meeting. So it is, I think Barry's wording was the next available meeting, was it? And if we don't have standards on the committee, we're not meeting as a standards committee. Have you anything else of standards that you're going to be bringing to that meeting, Sam?
No, there's nothing else standards pending for that next meeting.
So in which case, the next meeting of standards would be the meeting we put that on the agenda on, wouldn't it?
I'm happy if you are with that approach, Chair. I just wanted to make sure everyone's expectations were the same.
My expectations, it will come to us when you've got something sorted out rather than a timescale on it.
Thank you.
Right.
Chair, Councillor Oxley would like to speak.
Well,
so John, so aren't we automatically a standards committee every time we meet?
Not as far as I was concerned, because we have an audit committee when we meet doing audit things. We are a scrutiny committee all the time, as it were. But if we've nothing on standards on the committee, then as far as I'm concerned, we're not meeting as a standards committee. I don't really want to bring the lawyers in again, but we are a committee that covers all those issues. But it hasn't, the amendment has not said, could we have meeting as a standards committee in that amendment, so that if we're not discussing an item of standards, we're not meeting as a standards committee?
Okay, thanks, John.
Are you happy with that, Will?
I'm happy with that as the understanding, and neither Simon nor Barry has jumped in and said anything, so I'm assuming that must be right.
So they're either both exhausted or they're agreeing with us, one of the two.
We're both.
Both? Oh, well. So can I move that amendment? Can you read out the wording, please, Chris?
I've got, Chair, that a future report be provided by the monitoring officer to the next standards committee with options for an appeal process.
That's my memory of it. And so we will be putting that in under the recommendations 2.1 as a little 2.
Yes, Chair.
So I move that wording as a little 2 to go under the main recommendation.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Can we proceed?
We can, Chair. Councillor Bailey?
I support that.
Councillor Brackstone?
4.
Councillor Clark?
4.
Councillor Cousins? Sorry, Councillor Cousins? Could you repeat that, please, Councillor Cousins?
David?
I said 4.
4, thank you.
4.
Councillor Garbutt-Moore?
4.
Councillor Keel?
4.
Councillor Middleton?
4.
Councillor Oxley?
Against.
Councillor Rain?
4.
And Councillor Raper?
4.
That's 9, 4 and 1 against, Chair.
Thank you, everybody. We're nearly there. We're nearly unanimous. Sorry, Will. Right. So can we now vote? I now propose the recommendations with that amendment of the little 2 added to the recommendation on page 47. I move.
I second that.
The floor is yours, Christine.
Sorry, Councillor Bailey?
Yes, support.
Councillor Brackstone?
4.
Councillor Clark?
4.
Councillor Cousins?
4.
Councillor Garbutt-Moore?
4.
Councillor Keel?
4.
Councillor Middleton?
4.
Councillor Oxley?
Against?
Councillor Rain?
For.
Councillor Raper?
For.
That's 9 for and 1 against, Chair.
Thank you, everybody. We're now on to the next item on the agenda. Is anybody wanting a comfort break? Because we can have a 5-minute one if you want, because you're all at home, so there'll be no queuing.
And with respect, Chair, I wonder if I can invoke I'm going to forever be called the Anton clause and be forgiven and excused for the rest of the meeting. I've just got to put my 2 children to bed, and I don't think I'm needed for the next items.
I gave Anton permission to go. I don't remember. Oh well, yes, if you must. We don't want the little Carns to be up all night, really, do we?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee, as well.
Thank you ever so much, Barry.
Thank you, Barry.
Chair, I should like to leave as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Was that Angela?
It's
Jill. Jill. Sorry, Jill.
Yes. I think you've given standards a very good hearing this evening.
Thanks for your time, Jill.
We endeavour to give everything a good hearing, but I hope are you happy with where we've been and what we've been doing?
Certainly very happy. I'll wait and see how this pans out.
I don't mean necessarily the result. Is there anything you think we should have done that we haven't? Not necessarily the decisions we've made.
No.
Lovely.
No.
Thanks for your time, Jill.
Okay, thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Right, so we've lost Barry.
Are we having a comfort break, John?
Is Anton gone? Good night, Anton.
I'm still here, John, but I'm going to go soon.
Well, I'll say good night and thank you now then.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
See
you.
you later.
Cheers. Right, Simon. Is anybody waving wanting a comfort break?
No, Chair, there's no one waving for a comfort break.
Nobody waving for a comfort break. Jolly
Councillor
good.
Middleton is leaving and reconnecting.
Leaving and reconnecting?
Yes, I think she must be having some issues, but she's leaving and reconnecting. Simon will be able to confirm when she's back.
Are you okay with that, Tracy? Do you need a short break to do it, or?
I think she's gone already.
Yeah.
Has anybody any idea when she's coming back, or do we wait a minute, or is it a half an hour break, in which case we won't be having one?
No.
John, I'll message you now and find out what's happening. And
kind of you, Nathan. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that.
Yeah.
Because I don't want anybody to miss out on anything if we can avoid it. Yeah. I think we've got that 5-minute comfort break, whether we wanted it or not. Then.
Yeah.
Okay. I've just lifted a coffee cup above my head, but I don't know whether it'll have any response. Right, just while everybody's there, without Tracy, she's coming back in a minute or two, and if she doesn't, then we'll move on. How is it going, this thing? Is there is everybody feeling part of it and able to participate and getting a fair crack?
Yeah.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah. I prefer to be.
Anybody having any problems with it all?
No, all good so far.
I prefer to be at Ryedale House, but this is all right.
Yeah, well, I prefer Ryedale House, and this is why we made the proposal at the beginning. But I couldn't get that done in 2 or 3 hours. Well, the impossible is done immediately. Miracles take a little longer.
John, all right, John. Well, let's move on.
I'm just waiting a minute to say for Tracy.
She's John, is it? Oh, she's just typing.
She's
now.
just rejoining.
Yeah, she's saying she's trying to join. Yeah.
Are you back, Tracy?
Yes. Yes. Sorry.
We did shout after you, how long are you going for? But you've gone. Right, in which case, Simon, can you introduce agenda item 10, please, page 47?
I think Will's going to introduce this one, Chair.
Will, and I think I've said good evening, but if I haven't, good evening again.
Yeah, good evening, Chair, and good evening, members. So the item on the Local Government Ombudsman annual letter is set out Appendix 1, and a complainant would usually only be referred to the Ombudsman after completing the two-stage complaints process, followed by the Council. So the Ombudsman offers an impartial service to investigate issues raised, such as the process in how decisions are made, and these are detailed at section 6.6 of the report. I don't know if there's a bit of feedback on there. I'm certainly getting a little bit. But,
Yes, there is.
I'll keep going.
Just a reminder, if everybody can mute their microphones when they're not speaking, please.
So just to get into the detail of the report, during 2019-20, the Local Government Ombudsman received 7 inquiries in relation to the Council, and they're detailed at section 6.8 of the report. That's page 49. So the 7 inquiries, 4 of them were closed after initial inquiries. 2 were referred back to the Council for a local resolution, as they'd gone to the Ombudsman ahead of completing the two-stage complaints process of the Council, and 1 was subject to investigation by the Ombudsman. The investigation upheld the complaint and provided actions for the Council to undertake, which have been completed in the year. So when you look at the annual letter at Appendix 1, it does mean our upheld rate is viewed as 100%, but as there was only 1 complaint that was investigated, obviously that complaint was upheld. It doesn't take into account the low number of detailed investigations that are being carried out, as it was either going to be 0% or 100%. So it just feels slightly unfair when you're comparing it to other authorities, which have done that. Well, there's some information at Appendix 2 in regard to that. Just to emphasise that there is some historical information as part of the covering report. So if you compare it to last year, well, the year before, sorry, there was 3 detailed investigations undertaken. 1 was upheld and 2 were not upheld, but that gave a upheld rate of 33.3%. So when you compare that to this year, I hope you can kind of see the kind of flaw, as it were, in the statistics. But the annual letter is presented, and the recommendation is to note it for members. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Right. Comment, Jim. Hello?
Councillor Bailey?
I'll come back to him. Carrie?
No comments, Chair.
David?
No comment.
Nathan?
No comments, thank you.
Di?
No, I don't think I've got anything to add. Thank you, Chair.
Tracy?
No, nothing from me.
Will?
Just propose that we move it, John.
I will in a minute when I've gone through everybody. Angela?
No comment.
John?
A very thorough piece of work, so thank you for that, Will. I think there's a slant on the way that the figures are presented, you've already touched on. The percentage-wise does look skewed, but when you look at the numbers that have come through on the number of complaints and what's happened and what the complaints were, we're doing pretty blooming well, in my opinion. And these are some of the best figures I think I've seen in a long while. So I'm not perturbed by them, but the percentage aspect, is there any way that we can look at that and have it presented differently so it doesn't look so alarming? because somebody who doesn't understand these things will look at that and think, oh, not doing very well here. Look at the high percentage. But how many complaints are we talking here is the key thing, and how have we handled them and dealt with them, and the resolutions to this complaint and the success of that is where we need to be looking. So the presentation is all in a sense, and I appreciate it. It's probably not your fault.
Jim.
Sorry, Chair. My phone ran out of charge. I just missed a bit there, but I'm back now.
Have you any comment on it?
No.
Well, I want to just underline Will's comments and John Raper's comments that it's a very good report and we have done well. The only sort of side issue I might put on it in terms of complaints is there's an interesting balance between doing them right and doing them speedily. But you've got to be careful that if you let it go too long, lots more might go to the Ombudsman, and then they'll be referred back for local resolution, etc. We could increase that number. But no, I think we should be satisfied with it. I'm happy with it. And can we I propose that we note the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman's annual letter for 2019/20. Have I got a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
I'll second that, John.
Sorry?
I'll second that, John.
Thank you, Will. Anybody else want to make any comment before we take a vote?
No,
Right, thank you. Can we go to the vote, please, Chris?
We can, Chair. Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, I support.
Councillor Braxton?
4.
Councillor Clark?
4.
Councillor Cousins?
4.
Councillor Garbutt-Moore?
4.
Councillor Keel?
4.
Councillor Middleton?
4.
Councillor Oxley?
4.
Councillor Rain?
4.
Councillor Raper?
4.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you, Christine. Well, there we are, back together again. We've now got the next item on corporate corporate complaints. Is that you, Simon, or Will?
You're on mute, Simon.
Will again, and Margaret's also here for that item.
And good evening, Margaret. I don't think I said good evening earlier, and if I did, a second one won't do any harm.
Good evening.
Right, which one of you is batting first?
Yeah, I'll have a first go, John. So the report looks at the corporate complaints that were received by the council from the 1st of April 2019 to the 31st of March 2020. So as I said in relation to the previous item, the complaints process is a two-stage process. So the report sets out the performance of services in responding to complaints at stage 1 and stage 2. So in terms of numbers, we received 60 corporate complaints last year, which is exactly the same as the year before. And I just wanted to touch on something that Jill Baker said earlier about the likelihood that people would exhaust the complaint procedure as part of their kind of complaint. So the stats for last year are that 73% of complaints were resolved at stage 1, which is quite a high percentage before those that went on to stage 2. At section 6.4, I've laid out the service performance in relation to complaints. And the complaint procedure that we've got in place at the council does state that customers will receive a full written response within 15 days. So at stage 1, the average response time last year was 8.7 days, and the average response time at stage 2 was 23.56 days. So we have looked at the stage 2 complaints, and as a result of that, a review of the procedure, of the complaint procedure, has started, that we're looking to bring to the November committee, and we're also starting a series of monthly reports to service areas and some staff training in the future. Just to round off by saying we have included a lessons learned section at Appendix 2, so that's page 63 of the agenda pack, just to highlight some of the learning process that's been ongoing as a result of the complaints that we've received, and just to show that we're not just kind of resting on our laurels in relation to some of the things that have been brought to our attention. So, yeah, that's my summary, I suppose, Chair.
Thank you, Will. Are you wanting to add anything at this point, Margaret?
Just to kind of reiterate what Will said, there is a review, as you know, John went on regarding customer complaints that we had hoped to bring to the March meeting. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we couldn't manage to do that, so it will come to the November meeting. Again, just to highlight, if COVID willing, yes, and just to say that the elected members' complaints part is also referenced in the new customer complaints review as well, so we can always put a link onto that. We had also hoped to do ombudsman training with the staff, but unfortunately, again, because of COVID, that was delayed and they're not doing any online training, so we are looking at doing training with staff in-house regarding that. Will did mention the 3 areas that were highlighted that we kind of missed deadlines are 3 areas of planning and regulations, benefits and revenues, and housing. And again, these are normally because they're more complex and it's a wee bit harder. But again, we think there's training involved and feedback that needs to go back to the teams for service improvements. So hence the review of the customer complaints procedure and the monthly reports coming back to services, so we can start to measure performance. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Margaret. Right, I will run down again as usual. Jim?
So, yeah, nothing to add. I support the report.
Carrie?
No comment, Chair.
David?
No comment.
Nathan?
No comment.
Di?
No, thank you for, I think, another good, useful report, and I look forward to seeing the details of the new process in due course.
Tracy?
No comment.
Will?
No, it's just a statement of fact, John.
Angela?
No comment.
John?
It's a very thorough document, and I welcome it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. My only comment is, and I can't see it now properly, but I did wade through the lessons learned, and that seemed very, very useful approach to the whole thing. So whoever had that idea is, I think, well worth doing. But the timescales of how long things will take and how long they should take, I'm just a little nervous in this climate of trying to decide exactly where we should be in timescales. And thank you, Margaret, for picking up the fact of councillor complaints will be in here so that people will see, and then presumably it will say referred to the monitoring officer or the standards committee or wherever it's gone to as it goes through the standards process. Am I right?
Yeah, I think it's just to make it clear when we're doing the procedure that it's in the procedure, John, and it's also when we're putting it on the website that people will be able to see that there's a different process for that and that they'll be able to link in that. So that's why I'm just saying that it's been referenced in the new procedure that would be coming forward, that we have kind of liaised with Simon to be able to do that. So we can put a kind of more up-to-date link to the actual forum once it's been approved.
And that's what we were saying under the standards item earlier on.
Yeah, definitely.
So brilliant. Thank you both. Is there anything else anybody wants to ask before we go to the vote?
No raised hands, Chair.
No hands raised. Right. So we're on page 57. And the recommendation is as it is on page 57, 2.1. And the three points under that. I so move. Have I got a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Gary.
Okay, we'll go to the vote. Councillor Bailey?
Support.
Councillor Braxton?
For.
Councillor Clark?
For.
Councillor Cousins?
For.
Councillor Garbutt-Moore?
He's lost connection.
Okay. Councillor Keel?
For.
Councillor Middleton?
For.
Councillor Oxley?
For.
Councillor Rain?
For.
Councillor Raper?
For.
Do we have Councillor Garbutt-Moore back yet or no?
No, his battery's died.
Okay, it's unanimous, Chair.
NEMCON. Yes. What are we going to do with Nathan's vote? Are we going to hold it open until he gets back? Because I'm happy to do that if everybody else is. Can we do a Westminster where members are voting while we get on with the next item and then come back to that one? If anybody objects, please wave. If not, we'll, because I don't think Nathan should be missed out just because his battery's gone down.
No raised hands, Chair.
Everybody happy with that?
Fine.
We'll close that vote. Can you remind me, Chris, to come back to that?
I will, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. Part B items, matters referred to Council, HR policy, item 12, page 67. Is that you, Emma?
Yes, that's me, Chair.
Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So just as a brief introduction, the existing policy was written in 2010. So quite a number of years out of date, no revision since then. The current policy brings up to date some elements which haven't been included. So mainly sections 13.3 to 13.8 have been changed or added to, which are areas such as drug and alcohol safeguarding, police investigations and allegations. And the policy has just been tidied up, basically. That's it, to keep it brief. Hopefully people have read the policy, so if people have got questions, I'm open to that, Chair, obviously.
Right, any questions before we go into a debate on this for Emma? Jim?
I'm happy with this, Chair.
Carrie?
We're perfectly happy.
David?
No, we're all right.
Nathan?
No, I'm sorry I got cut off, Chair. I'm back now and no comment, thank you.
Can you remind me at the end of this item, we've got your vote to pick up for the last item. We've held it in abeyance. We are in the lobbies or whatever Parliament does.
Yeah, sorry, battery.
No, it's all right, not a problem at all. Di?
Yeah, no, I'm happy with the revisions.
Tracy?
No, I'm happy.
Will?
No questions.
Angela?
Just a little note. Just I wonder why is it? You know, they were so outdated. Why it's taken so long? That's all.
I could answer that by saying biodiversity action plan, but I wouldn't. Any answers, Emma?
I think it feels like there's been a huge amount to do. I can't speak for the fact that it's sort of 10 years since it's been revised. I've been in the organisation nearly 2. There is a lot to do in HR, many policies that are out of date. Maybe too much work for a small team. There's still a mountain to climb, but hopefully we're starting to make some inroads in that, which is the positive message that we want to send out now.
Right, going down again, has anybody got any comments they want to make? Anybody waving for that, Chris?
There's no raised hands, Chair.
No, I didn't think so far by the fact there was no questions. I have one comment, Emma, and I'm sorry I haven't raised this with you before, and that is 310.1. It is not appropriate for councillor officers to, etc. And 7 years ago, I would have not even blinked at that. I am now concerned, having had something like 4 years of people banging on the door, that how do you cope if you have got people with a complaint and the whole line of management above them is what they are complaining about?
I think we have a very different management structure in the organisation now. I think we have a very robust resolving issues at work policy, which has recently been passed by P&R and been embedded in the organisation over the last few months. That allows for an informal and a formal process, the ability to be straight to formal if the individual to make a complaint of such that involves, for example, their line manager. There is a full escalation process through line managers, heads of service, strategic management board and the chief executive, which I do believe works. We have
and what do you do if your complaint is about all of those? As I said, 7 years ago, I would have not even blinked at this, but I have learned a very painful lesson over about 3-4 years, that you need to have somewhere where people can go. And my concern is that there's no reference in here to the staff champion. And my understanding as a staff champion is that that is somewhere where people could go to if they believe the whole structure isn't there. And it doesn't matter how brilliant the policy is. And I like this policy and I like North Yorkshire's policies. But if the people in the line of management, from your immediate supervisor to the top, are condoning an inappropriate behaviour, the policies can be brilliant, that person still loses out. And my first advice when this happened to me was talk to your line manager. And if that doesn't work, talk to your line manager's manager. And if that doesn't work, talk to the union. None of that worked. So what do we do?
I think as HR practitioners, we are independent. I think
was our HR practitioner.
Previous people don't know the situation. But I think
this is like the question as to why it was sat there for 10 years. And I repeat, if I hadn't gone through what I went through in those 4 years, the ultimate responsibility for the people in a council, the responsibility holders, is the members. Now that is a long way off if everything's right, and should be a long way off. They shouldn't go anywhere near it.
I think the other thing that we need to take into consideration is any appeal process will involve elected members. So we do need to make sure that elected members are kept aside for those processes.
I think you'll find it's elected member.
there's flexibility within the policy depending on what we feel is appropriate on a panel. So it could be one elected member, it could be a panel of elected members, whatever is deemed appropriate in that situation. We have built flexibility into the policies.
And I'm suggesting that the staff champion should be in here. Because if they believe the structure is there, and I sat and watched it in complete and utter disbelief, the case has got nowhere near, and there were 10 to 20 of them. They got nowhere near appeals procedures and members' appeals because people gave up, had mental problems, left the council, muttered and moaned among themselves, etc., because there was no way out.
The other thing to take into consideration now is the early conciliation process through ACAS. So there's no fee for people to look at early conciliation.
They didn't get anywhere near ACAS.
But the situation is very different now, and that's what I'm saying.
There's not one stray neuron in my brain suggesting that the current situation is anything like that was. But you can't say that for the next 10 years, or however long this policy runs, that there never will be. And if you've got a staff champion, that should be, and I would hope the staff champion would say, have you discussed it with your line manager? Have you discussed it with your line manager's manager? Have you taken it to the union before they say or do anything? But if the system is rotten going up this structure, you need somebody outside of it to appeal to or to inform of. That is my concern. And I'm sorry for not raising it with you earlier, but I've been wading through stuff. It takes me weeks to get through paperwork at the moment, and not hours. Now, this is going to full council, and I'm quite happy to raise it at full council. Or would it be sensible for you to have a look at where the staff champion fits in? Because the last time round, it was the staff champion, overview and scrutiny, and the next staff champion that sorted it. And there was...
Charlie, who's the current staff champion?
Sorry?
Who's the staff champion?
Well, I am at the moment, but that's only until...
You've got a problem there.
Sorry?
Forgive me for putting it bluntly. I think you've got a problem there. It feels like a bit of a conflict to me.
What conflict is that, Jim?
That you are saying the staff champion should be involved with this, ask the chairman of scrutiny.
No, I'm saying the last time round, the only people who eventually got it sorted was the staff champion, who wasn't me, and the chair of scrutiny, who was me, got it underway. But it took us years, and it shouldn't. And the suffering of people in that time was massive. Now, it all got to go wrong, which it did then, and I'm not for a second thinking it isn't massively better. And if you'd asked me 7 years ago, I would have said, don't be ridiculous, a good HR system and a good management system is all you need. I have learned a lesson.
Sure, I just think you've got a bit of a problem saying it should be the staff champion when that's yourself.
No. I'm quite happy to resign as staff champion if you think that's a problem. I'm raising it because I've seen it as staff champion, not because I am staff champion and I'm wanting somebody to come to me with it.
Oh, well,
the previous staff champion raised it. Now, is there a way through this, Emma, in terms of staff champion or something else before it goes to full council?
Personally, I think we've got robust enough systems in the current processes to have that. We've got the option to ask, like I say, Unison, independent advice through HR, legal services. Personally, I don't think that we need to put that into the policy, is my personal opinion. So
how would you have solved the previous problem?
I don't think it would have happened in...
That's what I thought while it was happening.
Come on, Chair.
I had no belief it was
serve
happening.
the committee, Chair. Come on, Chair. Serve the committee.
I don't know if it helps, Chair, but there is a review of member champions which full council had asked us to undertake, and I don't know whether this is something we could pick up as part of that. It's not going to happen before the next meeting of full council, though. But we have been asked to look at all the member champion roles and what they do and what their remit is.
When was that, son?
It was requested at annual council last year. I think it was passed as part of a resolution at council. It then got put on hold a bit because it was to link in with the council plan, which, as members will be aware, that got delayed and has only recently been approved. And also, you know, attention being focused on COVID-related matters had also delayed it, but it is still an outstanding piece of work.
I think, and it's irrespective of the fact that I am the staff champion, because I don't see anything going wrong in the next, even if staff champion doesn't get sorted out in the next 2.5 years. I don't see anything going wrong in the next 2.5 years. All I know is that it can. And if you don't have a release mechanism, the pressure cooker can get very hot, and a lot of people suffer. And I can't see what the staff champion is supposed to do if they don't do what the previous staff champion did to try and find out what was going on. Not me.
That was exactly what I wanted to add. That it rather the role becomes almost obsolete. I mean, that's surely what the staff champion's there for.
I can't hear you, Kerry. You're breaking up. I don't know if you're breaking up for everybody else. Can you try again, Kerry?
I just said that it makes the role of staff champion somewhat redundant. You know, surely that is what the staff champion is there for, and history has proven that.
Could do.
There's a number of other councillors waiting to speak, Chair.
Right, come on, let's go round them. I've made my point. We'll see where we go with it.
Okay, we've got Councillor Oxley, Councillor Rain, and Councillor Raper.
Oh, sorry, is that a queue for?
Hang on a second. Councillor Oxley, right. Councillor Rain,
and Councillor Raper.
And Councillor Raper. Oxley,
yes, Chair.
Rain, and Raper. Oh, that's neat. All together at the bottom of the alphabet. Will?
Yeah, I think this is a very robust policy, Chair, and I tend to agree that had this been in place some years ago, things might have come to fruition or come into sight sooner. However, I do take your point on staff champion. I wonder whether the way, given that this review is on, whether the way forward is to actually adopt this, but then put a caveat in that says the role of the staff champion in things going forward is under review and will be built in when that's been finalised.
Angela?
My main concern, just listening, because obviously HR, it sounds brilliant what's happening now in the present, but my main concern is, you know, I can't see anything that suggests when the policies are updated, as in, you know, how regularly are they going to now be updated? And I feel that's very important, because if there's going to be another 10 years before they're updated, then we're in trouble. That's my concern.
John? Thank you, Angela, sorry.
Thank you. I've had a cross-eyed reading this particular report, so forgive me for that. That's my age, I think. I like what I've seen, and I like what you've written. If it sticks to it and comes true. But I am treading with trepidation here again, same as Councillor Clark is, because we've been bitten once because of circumstances prior. And I was approached a long, long time ago, and I think I was the first member to be approached, actually, but somebody approached me and I said to them what they should do, which is part and parcel of what we've agreed to do as part of the policy tonight, the way forward and the steps that should be taken. Go to your line manager, and if that line manager is the problem, go to the one above. This particular individual didn't want to do that. She wouldn't sign a piece of paper saying what the concerns were. She told me what they were verbally, which were absolutely horrendous, but she would not actually put a name to a piece of paper, and that's where it all fell down. I was left in abeyance for a very, very long time. So I can fully understand where Councillor Clark is coming from. So first of all, or secondly, can I then welcome this particular document? It does what it says on the tin, hopefully, and we will be keeping a very close eye on it, or I will be for the time I serve on this council, and that it works and it does what it says it does on the tin. And I would hope that if you've got any concerns on this that you have, Emma, that you can come and talk to either Councillor Clark and myself and run through ideas and concepts and so forth, if you think that our input might be useful to you in formulating a new way of thinking. So that's an open offer. I think we have to accept this particular report and get it on, because it's not live yet, is it? Shake of your head will tell me that. Yeah. So we need to make it live. We need to have it in action ASAP. So I'm going to go with this tonight. I think we need it there, and we need it sooner rather than later. And so for that reason only, I'm going to go with this tonight. We need it there now. Thank you.
Oh, I seem to be on my own here. Well, that's not necessarily surprising.
Chair, there are more councillors waiting to speak.
Yes, please. Who?
We've got Councillor Oxley, Councillor Rain and Councillor Keel.
Well,
no, I'll defer to the other two. I've spoken once, John.
Thank you. Di?
Yeah, I think my view on this is that we should be going with it this evening, but I do appreciate what you're saying, Chair. So I would also like to support Councillor Oxley's proposal that we go with it with a caveat in there that once the member champion roles are sorted out, the reviews, whatever is going to happen with those and whether they're actually going to exist going forward or not, that we can revisit it. It's not, it's not a document that is set in stone and will sit on a shelf, I would hope, for as long as they have done in the past, and that it can be revisited and it can be amended appropriately. So, but I do think we need to have something in place, and so I think we should support this evening.
Right. Di? Angela?
It just going back to my concern about how long, is it going to be left if things change, because it's excellent and we want to keep on top of everything the way the world is and so on. And if there's any way of being able to put something in to say, it will be regularly updated or so on, I'd be much happier. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else waving?
Emma would like to speak, Chair.
Who? I didn't catch that, sorry.
Emma, sorry, Chair.
Emma, yeah, sure.
Sorry, can I just come back to
Please, Emma.
answer the question about the review dates? The majority of policies will be reviewed on a 3-year cycle. Some policies will be reviewed on an annual cycle. We have spoken to Unison about this, and they're in full agreement with them that some of the policies do need to be worked through to make sure that they work for the organisation, and so hence some of them being a 1-year review date. I would expect this one to be, partly because of the fact it's actually attached to the code of conduct, the constitution. Obviously, it's quite a lengthy process to go through in order to get this changed. However, we can do this on a 1-year basis if necessary. Obviously, any other legislative developments would need to come into play. If anything happens legislatively, then we would review a policy based on that basis too.
Thank you. Anybody else wanting to bat?
No further hands raised, Chair.
Right. It appears I'm on my own with this one. I can't get my head round why the staff champion, whoever that is not involved in this process. Because that person, on any definition, I would have thought was the champion for the staff. And having seen it. Now, the policies last time were not updated, but they weren't up the pole. The problem was that up the management tree, they weren't delivered. And it is a massive step for a lot of people to start going to ACAS and judicial review and. And there's an awful lot of people are very concerned, particularly if you have a climate of redundancies, that if they rock the boat, they'll lose their job anyway. But I think the way through this is going to full council, and I will withdraw these comments. I don't disagree with the comments I've made, but I withdraw these comments and make them and take them into the debate at full council. I think that's the easiest way of doing it. Let me underline that I think this is a superb piece of work, and bluntly, if all I can find is one subsection of a section that I disagree with, overall the policy is absolutely spot on and superb, and you've done an awful amount of work on this, and thank you, Emma, for that work in putting it all together, and it's clear cut and so on. And I've just that one concern that the staff champion does not appear in here, and the board, i.e. the councillors, are ultimately responsible for everything that happens in Ryedale House. The same as on the county councillors are responsible for everything. And on that basis, to exclude them completely by the sentence, it is not appropriate for council members to, council officers to lobby members, I would agree with that, but in moral and ethical terms, if you are at screaming pitch, who do you go to? Now, I think I shall shut up at that point. We'll take the vote on it as it stands, and I will be abstaining, not because I think it's anything wrong with the policy overall, but because I think it misses a trick there, and I don't understand how you can have a policy that covers the relation to members and not including the staff champion. But we can discuss that outside of the meeting, and I can raise it when it comes to full council, which will be in December, if I'm right, is it?
Yes.
Yes.
It's December, which will be coming to council. Did I hear a faint yes somewhere?
Yes, Chair.
Sorry, John, I was nodding, but yes, it is.
Just like Anton, I can't see your nodding either. But your nodding is more appropriate than Anton's nodding, because couldn't decide with Anton. Right, let's take a vote on it.
Chair, sorry, apologies. Councillor Braxton would like to speak.
Yes, please.
John, can I just say that I think you must misunderstood perhaps my comment earlier, because I was saying that, you know, what is the point really in having a Swiss champion if there is this kind of clause that they cannot, council officers cannot approach them about anything. So I am in agreement with you there. So.
That's pretty much quicker than me summarising how I feel, and I did feel about the post of staff champion, not the fact that I am in that post as such at the moment. So on that basis, I will be abstaining. Is there anybody else waving?
No,
Chair. I think it's far better, Emma, if it is debated at full council rather than just here. And as it's going to full council, that should do. Right, can somebody else please, because it's a bit odd if the mover of a recommendation then abstains. Can somebody else move the revised policy is agreed for implementation?
I'll move that, John.
That you will?
It is.
And can I have a seconder?
I'll second it, Chairman.
Or can Will have a seconder, please?
I'll second
Yes, please, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Whoever did that, Christine, I presume you've got?
I have indeed, Chair. It's Councillor Keel.
Right, thank you.
Okay, we vote. Councillor Bailey?
For.
Councillor Braxton?
Abstain.
Councillor Clark?
Abstain.
Councillor Cousins?
Abstain.
Councillor Garbutt-Moore?
For.
Councillor Keel?
For.
Councillor Middleton's no longer with us. She's left, so she isn't here to vote, Chair.
Yeah, well, that's got to be that, yeah.
Councillor Oxley?
For.
Councillor Rain?
For.
Councillor Raper?
For.
That's 6 for and 3 abstentions, Chair.
Thank you, everybody.
That's it.
So that makes me closer to Will being out of line with the vote, Will.
Yeah, we all
right.
find there sometimes.
I didn't hear that, sorry.
We all find ourselves there sometimes.
Well, quite. Right. Well, thank you, Emma. Thank you, Emma.
She's gone.
Gone? Has Andrew gone as well? Has Andrew gone as well?
Thanks.
I missed that, sorry.
Sorry, I was just saying thank you, John. It's Emma.
Oh, thank you, Emma, ever so much. And has Andrew gone?
No, I'm still here, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for your work into this.
Thank you for your efforts, yeah.
And do we need to thank Marie as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We'll feed that back.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'll move we thank the office. I'll move it actually to show there is no ill feeling with the thing at all. I thank the officers very much for a very thorough and comprehensive report.
Seconded.
Those in favour? Sorry about that, Chris.
Councillor Bailey?
So, what are we doing now?
A vote of thanks.
Vote of thanks for the officers.
For a comprehensive and thorough report.
I think, Chair, all you're doing here is trying to absolve the fact that you couldn't support the report in the first place.
Jim, you've been asked which way you're voting.
I'll abstain.
Councillor Braxton?
4.
Councillor Clark,
4.
Councillor Cousins,
4.
Councillor Garbutt-Moore,
4.
Councillor Keel,
4.
Councillor Oxley,
4.
Councillor Rain,
4.
Councillor Raper.
4.
Thank you, everybody.
8, 4 and 1 abstention, Chair.
Yeah. Decisions from other committees. Now, I really am in the dark now. I have not got that in front of me.
To follow. And we have the follow.
Who were the 3 people that they're there? Jim, can you take us through your view of it?
I attended P&R and I thought it was, what I would say is I'd like to thank the officers for enabling us to have a face-to-face meeting. I thought it was really helpful and I thought it was really productive. And I thought the considerations were quite thorough, actually. Members had different views, members had concerns, but I thought that the items on the agenda were sufficiently debated and legitimate decisions were made.
Thank you, Jim. Carrie?
Yes, there's much healthy debate. Yeah, I'll echo what Councillor Bailey has to say. Yeah.
Right. I have one concern, and that is the HR policy that we have done tonight is going to full council. And Simon, could you help me? Why are the HR policies that went to P&R not also going to full council? Is there a reason for that?
Yes, the policy we've looked at tonight is the Officer Code of Conduct, and that forms part of the Constitution, so that requires full council approval. For other policy matters, generally, it only needs to go to full council if it's a significant departure from previous policies. And I think based on what Emma had said at Policy and Resources, those items, it was more around adding further detail to the existing policies rather than significantly deviating from them.
Right, that's what I thought. I have one concern, and I think there's a very easy way to deal with it, and that is we have got an appeals committee in the Constitution, have we not? Again, I'm coming back to Simon just to check my facts.
The appeals subcommittee is appointed by Policy and Resources on an annual basis.
But it's in the Constitution, is it not?
I don't think it's referenced in the Constitution itself. I will just check, if you can bear with me for a moment.
Yeah, thank you, Simon.
It's not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution. In the employment procedure rules, it does talk about members may be involved in appeals from time to time, but that really links back into the council's policies. So it says that there may be policies that require members to be involved in appeals rather than the Constitution requiring members to be involved in appeals.
Because my memory tells me that we had a massive big debate at full council on this in relation to the members' appeal committee, subcommittee. Have we any idea when that was or what it was?
I know it has been debated in the past, either at Policy and Resources or at full council.
I think it was in full. I think it was in full council.
I'm not sure, from memory, how long ago that was, but it is a matter that has been debated at some previous point when changes to policy and procedure were brought forward.
This is what I'm thinking. And if it was decided by council, I'm not sure that P&R can reverse a decision of council without it going to without it going to full council. And I'm looking for the easiest way of doing that, rather than dragging out tonight's meeting. Could we call it in and refer it to full council on the basis, if you find that it did go through full council, and if it didn't, then I'll withdraw the call in, so that we could either discuss it or just nod it through at the next overview and scrutiny, so that it be ready for full council in December, rather than hold a special meeting of overview and scrutiny and a special meeting of P&R. Just refer it to full council from the next overview and scrutiny meeting, if it went through full council and it's contrary to what that decision was. Can we do that as the easiest way of doing it? Because we don't really want 2 more meetings.
In terms of constitutionally, whether it can be done, there's a call-in process set out in the Constitution, which I'm just looking for at the moment. And it says you need to put in a written request signed by the chairman or any 3 members of the committee to call in an item, and then overview and scrutiny has to have a meeting to review that within 10 working days. So in terms of timescales, if a call-in was submitted next week, that would fit the timescales for the next scheduled meeting of overview and scrutiny. So at that point, any further information about the issues you've raised could be presented to the committee, and then the committee could decide whether the item was to be referred on to full council. So constitutionally, that would be the way to do it if members wanted to do it.
So if I, just keeping it simple, if I call it in the next 10 days, it could go to the next meeting of overview and scrutiny for discussion to go to full council. Is that what you're saying?
It would be up to the committee at its next meeting to decide whether it wanted to refer it to full council, but it could
that
consider...
scrutiny meeting doesn't have to be within 10 days or anything like that.
The scrutiny, because the scrutiny meeting to consider a call-in should be within 10 working days. If the call-in request was timed right, it could feed into the existing meeting, which would obviously be more efficient than having to put in extra meetings.
But if we delayed the call-in for 9 days or whatever, would that get us to the next meeting of scrutiny?
I think the next meeting of scrutiny, that's the 22nd of October. I think, I'm sure Chris and will tell me if that's not right. So if something was called in, probably from, just looking at my calendar, from the middle of next week, the 10 working days would feed into that meeting anyway.
But the middle of next week is 5 working days away.
Oh no, the 10 working days is after an item's called in. You have to have an overview and scrutiny committee 10 working days after that to consider it.
I think that's the best way through for it, provided it can come up at the next meeting. I don't want to call an extra meeting of P&R, and I don't want to call an extra meeting of scrutiny. But if it reverses a decision that was made by full council, then my belief is that full council should decide that it wants to reverse that decision or doesn't want to reverse that decision. This is the disadvantage of only having four hours in the last couple of days, and I apologise for that.
Chair.
Whoever that was, yes, please.
Yeah, I've got a raised hand. I've got a raised hand, but it's probably not. John, I'm going to confess, it might be because it's late at night. I'm confused with where you're going with this.
I'm saying that I would like, I am concerned that we are reversing a full council decision, which Simon will look up, but my memory says we had one, as to whether or not members did the appeal committee. Now, I know of nothing in the pipeline and nobody being disciplined and no chance of an appeal committee in the next 2 or 3 months, so it's not urgent.
But
I think council had a massive debate on it, and I'm guessing it's about 5 or 6 years ago, because there was a move at that point to abolish the members' appeals committee, and we had a member of staff that was we've had two. We've had one appeals committee that I know of that upheld an appeal, so the member of staff was not sacked. And we've had one where the appeals committee reversed, upheld the decision. So one reversal and one upheld, and that was in line with council policy.
Certainly, Chair, in my time, I have sat on an appeals committee. So presumably one of the ones you're talking about. But I thought we nominated people to the appeals committee every year.
We do, and that's why I think we do. But the policies that went through P&R abolished the, maybe not deliberately, but in effect abolished the appeals committee, the members' appeals committee. Now, that may well be what the new council wishes to do, but it's not council policy. So I'm suggesting that I call it in 10 days' time, which makes it go to scrutiny in 10 days' time so that we can look at it with more of the facts. And I don't even think then that we can do much else other than send it to full council and say, there you are, you sort it out. Because I don't think scrutiny can decide to endorse overturning a full council decision.
So, sorry, Chair, I'm sorry. So, are we actually saying that the appeal subcommittee has been abolished?
In effect, yes.
Sorry. From where?
And I don't even know that P&R was aware that they'd done that. Because I wasn't until after the meeting.
It must be in the draft minutes.
No, they've done it, but I wasn't aware that they'd done it at the meeting or before the meeting or any other time until after the meeting. And I went, hang on a minute, that's in effect abolishing the appeals committee, and in effect that is reversing council policy. And I don't think P&R can reverse council policy.
Not high enough up.
And I'm very glad, yes, quite, John. And I'm very glad the lawyers have got home. Because it could be a field day for a couple of lawyers. I think our simplest route is to call it in, have a call-in meeting that just goes agreed, sends it to full council, and full council can have a debate whether or not it wants to abolish the appeals committee or not. If it decides to uphold the appeals committee, then the policy will have to be amended. And if it decides to abolish the appeals committee, the policy can stand as it is.
I don't understand how P&R can abolish something without realising they've abolished it.
Well, neither do I, but I didn't spot it until after, because it takes me ages to read anything at the moment.
Right. When's the next P&R meeting? There'll be a P&R meeting before the next council, won't there?
There's a Policy and Resources Committee in November. I can clarify that. It appears that Emma and Andrew are still on the call. I don't know if they're able to shed any light on the questions that members have raised that would help in formulating a way forward.
Andrew? Is Andrew there?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Yeah, the approach that we've now taken to this doesn't necessarily abolish the appeals committee as such. What we're doing is allowing a combination of elected members and a member of the senior management board to actually make the decision where there is an appeal against a dismissal. So that's what we've done. So it hasn't necessarily abolished.
And that's and I didn't spot that until after the meeting, and then I realised that in effect the members only appeals committee has been abolished. In effect, not necessarily knowingly or willingly or anything elsely. Now that was full council policy as far as my memory serves me right. And if that is the case, and I won't do a call into the next scrutiny if that is not the case, but I think that is in fact the case. And therefore, overview and scrutiny really his hands are tied, that it would have to be a full council decision to do that.
Sorry.
And the present arrangement is not a members-only appeals committee.
Sorry, Chair. If there's, given that anything like this would come to presumably December's full council meeting.
Yep.
And there'll be a P&R meeting before that.
It could go to P&R, but P&R will just have to acknowledge that it's done that and send it on to full council, I would have thought.
It seems to me that would be a better way than calling it in and having other meetings.
It could be, and we can decide when we've got the facts in front of us in our overview and scrutiny meeting at the end of October. We don't have to decide now.
Right, okay.
And if the evidence doesn't fit what my vague memory is telling me, I won't call it in.
Okay, John.
But if we are reversing full council policy, as John Raper says, it's above scrutiny or P&R's pay grade to
make that decision.
To make that decision, yes.
Fully understand that, Chair. I just don't want it to clog up any more meetings than we've got. I mean, it seems to me that we've got a P&R before that, and that's when it could be.
Well, precisely. And if I was wanting to create meetings, I could call an overview and scrutiny in a fortnight's time, and then a P&R within 10 working days of that, and create 2 more meetings. I'm trying to avoid creating any more meetings.
Thank you.
But I think I need to delay that call in till A, Simon has checked the facts, and B, it's near enough overview and scrutiny to be discussed at our next meeting rather than calling a special overview and scrutiny.
Yeah.
I can go with that.
That's the trouble with trying to be helpful. You have to explain it all. If you could see, I've got a smirk on my face there, but the easy route would just to be called a scrutiny the week after next, and then a special P&R to look at it. The sensible route is to try and get it to fit into the timetables, and it slots into full council at the beginning of December.
I understand that now, John.
Yeah, we need the information from Simon. Is your suspicion accurate? And I think that we have to leave it at that point until Simon's come back and said, yes, it is. No, it isn't. One or the other.
And then I will, if it is reversing a council decision, I will then call it in so that it goes to our next scrutiny meeting. Yeah. And if it is reversing a full council decision, I think it's very simple thing that scrutiny can't decide that full council shouldn't look at it because we'll be aware of it, and we just go get on with it. Full council, you decide,
and then full council can make the decision.
Correct.
Chair, I'm a little bit confused here, but I'd just like to say, if it's a joint member officer panel dealing with officer code of conduct issues, that seems to me to be a good final outcome, regardless of the jiggery-pokery of this stuff. I think, to be honest, if you have concerns about that decision, that's absolutely right, and we should clarify that. But like I say, if that was the final outcome of being a joint member officer panel dealing with those things, I don't think that's a bad one.
That's your view, and maybe my view, but wasn't the view, if my memory is right, as John's just said, of what full council was, whatever it was that it decided it.
About 3 years ago.
I can't remember when it was, John. I'm not going to pretend to.
Going back that far, easily.
And all this lot is on tape, so we can't pretend we don't know. But I'm trying to get the easiest route through, and if it has to be a full council decision, full council can then decide what it wants to decide when it gets it.
That suits me, Jim.
Yep, that's fine.
Anybody else wanting to bat on that?
No raised hands, Chair.
Right, so if you can do that, Simon, and contact me appropriately so that I can call it in if I have to. You and I can discuss the mechanics of call-in without having a piece of COVID-rich paper. And we can then work from there to bringing it to the next scrutiny meeting. And if I'm bringing it forward, I think it'll be a simple, full council has to decide this. Thank you very much. You decide what you want, full council. So it shouldn't take us any time at scrutiny worth a light. Anybody else wanting to bat on that one? Are you happy with what I'm proposing? Wave your hand if you're not happy.
No raised hands, Chair.
No raised hands. Are there a lot of confused looks on the faces or not?
Well,
hard to tell. Right, is there anything else on P&R? No. What do we do here, Will? Do we...
we wind up and go home.
What do we minute here? Okay, let me give you a wording that the overview and scrutiny accepts the P&R minutes with a proviso that the chair and officers will look at whether or not the P&R have unwittingly, I think would be the best way of putting it, unwittingly appear to have reversed a full council decision. And then I can move forward, Simon can move forward, and it'll come to scrutiny or be forgotten in the mists of time, whichever it turns out to be. Can we agree that proposal? Have I got a seconder?
I can second that for you.
Thank you, John.
Chair, Councillor Oxley would like to speak.
Yes, please, Will.
Yeah, the wording just sounded a little harsh, I think, John, to me. But, I understand.
Say that again, I didn't hear you.
The wording of your sentence there sounded a little harsh to me, but I understand the sentiment.
I'm happy for the officers to adjust the wording to make it fit. That
would be good. I mean, I think something along the lines of accept the minutes of P&R, but we'll review this particular case, something like that.
Yeah, that's what I thought I'd said, but that'll do.
Okay.
Are you happy to look at that wording, Simon, Will, Chris?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, happy.
Right, so I move that.
Okay.
John seconded it.
Yep. Okay, so we'll vote Councillor Bailey.
Yes, for.
Councillor Braxton, I think, is left. Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Cousins.
I think David's gone.
Okay. Councillor Garbutt-Moore.
For.
Councillor Keel.
For.
Councillor Oxley.
Abstain.
Councillor Rain.
I think she's gone.
And Councillor Raper.
For.
That's 5, 4 and 1 abstention, Chair.
Was that you again, Will?
Indeed, John.
It's good to keep you keeping up the tradition.
Wouldn't
I
want
have, as I said at the beginning, I have no other urgent business. Is there anybody else got anything else they wish to raise?
There's no indication of any raised
No
hands,
indication.
Chair.
Can I thank you all for your forbearance? We've covered a lot of ground tonight, and I hope you think it's been a successful meeting. Thank you all, and thank you to the officers for putting it all together. And who's left? Chris, Simon, Andrew, Will, Emma?
Yes,
Emma's
Margaret.
gone. And Margaret. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you,
I'll be in touch with. You'll be in touch with me, or I'll be in touch with you over that last issue, Simon.
Okay, will do.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Good night.
And good night. Good night.
It's there.
Shall I stop the streaming?
Yes, please, if you could stop the streaming.
Well,